Welcome to Fiction Audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, like and subscribing would be greatly appreciated. If you have any recommendations for novels, comment below.
Please join my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/fictionaudiobook.
Chapter 271, 375, The Omnipresent Traps of Time. On a windswept cliff in Norway. Hawk, looking sharp and broad-shouldered in a black suit picked out by Gwen, stood facing Odin. The former Allfather looked like a vagrant who had just lost his wife and his will to live. Just by looking at their attire, one could deduce a simple, universal truth. A man without a wife can barely manage the basics of daily survival. But that wasn't the point of this meeting. The temporal traps. That was the crucial subject they were dissecting. Odin's single, ancient eye regarded Hawk with a profound, weary calmness. A conclusion that has become the past. You can change the process that leads to it, but you can never alter the conclusion itself. The Sorcerer Supreme changed her process. But she no longer exists in this timeline. Hawk raised an eyebrow. It was true. The Ancient One had seemingly survived, escaping the clutches of time with his help. But in reality, the Ancient One was dead. Because the Ancient One no longer existed within the primary timeline of this universe. From a certain perspective, she had indeed perished. Having delivered this sobering truth, Odin pulled his gaze away from Hawk. He turned back to the vast, endless ocean stretching out before them, and slowly began to speak. Long, long ago, the cosmos of the World Tree was a brutal, barbaric place. For Asgard, it was an era of blood and iron. Odin began his reign as a conqueror. Alongside his firstborn, Hela, he forged the golden realm of Asgard through relentless, bloody wars of subjugation. In those days, any realm that refused to bend the knee to Asgard faced absolute slaughter. That was Hela's way. And it was Odin's way, too. After conquering the 9 realms, Odin's ambition outgrew the World Tree cosmos. He wanted more. He wanted to carve out new territories for Asgard with his sword and the blood of his enemies. He set his sights on the primary universe beyond the World Tree, the Marvel 616 universe. But Odin encountered the exact same problem Hawk had faced before acquiring the Reality Stone. His power was anchored to the World Tree cosmos, it did not belong to the primary universe. To project his might into this new reality, he needed a conduit. A beachhead. So, Odin severed Midgard. Earth fell from the World Tree, dropping into the primary universe, and through it, the power of Asgard could finally manifest in this new realm. But Odin forgot one crucial rule. When you gaze long into the abyss gazes also into you. Before Midgard became Earth, Odin had looked into time and seen his conquest of the 9 realms. There was no danger in that. While the World Tree cosmos possessed a god of time, that deity was ultimately subordinate to Odin, the king of the gods. But when Odin stood upon Midgard, now Earth, and gazed into time once more, he was no longer looking at his own subordinate. He was looking at eternity. And so, Odin fell into time's trap. He saw the coming of Ragnarok. He saw the gods of Asgard falling. He saw the people of Asgard weeping in despair. He saw the very land of Asgard shattering and burning. From the moment I realized I was trapped, I tried to change it. I laid down my spear and my sword. But my firstborn, Hela. I couldn't bring myself to destroy her. So, I imprisoned her. In the centuries that followed, I tried everything to delay the arrival of Ragnarok. I sought every possible way to stop it. But then, my wife, Frigga. That was time's warning to me. Hearing this, Hawk frowned as Odin turned back to face him, a deep, lingering sorrow flashing in his single eye. Frigga's death. Time did that. My wife, Frigga, she was raised by witches. Frigga, the queen of Asgard, was no delicate flower. She had been raised by powerful sorceresses. To put it bluntly, no matter how off her game Frigga might have been, there was absolutely no way she should have been killed by a single stab wound from a mindless cursed soldier created by Malekith. Now, Odin was providing a far more logical explanation. He had tried to fight his destined end, and time had retaliated. But Hawk thought back to the events of Thor 1 and Thor 2, piecing together Odin's actions during that period. He frowned deeper. What did you do? I allowed Malekith the Accursed to invade. I intended to let the Dark Elves take Jane Foster and plunge the 9 realms back into eternal darkness. Hawk's pupils contracted slightly. Looking at Odin's calm expression, the pieces clicked into place. He instantly understood why Odin had done it. Of course. If the 9 realms were plunged back into the primordial dark, effectively rebooting, there would be no Ragnarok. And if that happened, the timeline of the World Tree wouldn't be consumed by the primary universe. But your plan failed, and Frigga died. Yes. The 9 realms were not rebooted, largely because of you. Hey. Hawk bristled at the accusation. He glared at Odin. Even if I hadn't been there, Thor and Jane would have stopped Malekith at the last second anyway. Because that was how the movie went. Just as the convergence aligned and Malekith was about to unleash the ether, Thor arrived in the nick of time and saved the day. So, Odin's scheme would have failed with or without him. Malekith would have been defeated, and Ragnarok would still be looming on the horizon. Wait. Hiss. It seems you understand. Odin watched as Hawk drew in a sharp breath. I tried to change the process, and I did. But the conclusion remains fixed. If Thor hadn't stopped Malekith, you would have. The universe ensures the outcome. Hawk scowled, staring at the old king. You could have told Thor. No. I couldn't. Why not? You and the Ancient One told me. You possess the ability to collapse your own timeline. Thor does not. The moment I told him the truth, I would have dragged him into the temporal trap with me. Time would never have let him go. Eternity. Time is time. Eternity is eternity. Odin shook his head. Eternity is merely the abstract manifestation of the primary multiverse's timeline. Eternity is time, but time is not eternity. Hawk raised an eyebrow at the distinction. Hawk processed Odin's words, then looked back at him. You couldn't tell Hela the truth, and she wouldn't listen to reason. So you chose to imprison her instead of executing her. She is my daughter. Even though the Ragnarok I originally foresaw was triggered by my firstborn. That is merely the process, not the conclusion. Ragnarok, the consumption of the world tree cosmos by the primary universe, that is the conclusion. Hela triggering it is just one possible process. Even if I executed Hela, it wouldn't change the ultimate conclusion of Ragnarok. I could only delay it. But I couldn't tell her why. So I sealed her away, hoping that while I bought us time, I would find a way to truly break the cycle. Unfortunately, I failed. And now, Hela. Odin's voice remained calm, resigned. I cannot hold her for much longer. Since Midgard fully plunged into the temporal current of this universe, my power has been draining at an incredible rate. My time is almost up. He was the chief god of the world tree cosmos. But Odin hadn't created the world tree. Simply put, the world tree created Odin, not the other way around. Therefore, Odin's power was inextricably bound to the world tree itself. They shared the same glory, and they shared the same decay. He wasn't like Hawk. Hawk created. So, the moment Midgard fully merged with the primary timeline, its connection to the world tree was completely severed. Before, Earth had dropped from the world tree, but its fundamental essence still belonged to it. But now, having lost Earth entirely, the world tree cosmos was like a balloon with a massive hole punctured in it. The primary universe was accelerating its consumption of the world tree. And naturally, Odin, as the chief god of that decaying cosmos, bore the brunt of the collapse. So, yes. Odin was about to make his final exit. Hawk fell silent. He looked at the weary old god standing before him. After a long moment, he offered a single word. I'm sorry. What else could he say? Hey buddy, cheer up, I can fix this. Yeah, right. How much did he have to drink to be that delusional? The only thing Hawk could do was offer his condolences and tell Odin he was sorry for his loss. As for anything else, he was powerless to help. Hearing Hawk's simple apology, a faint, peaceful smile touched Odin's weathered face. He changed the subject. You are here for life. Yes. Hawk nodded. Just as he was about to elaborate, Odin began to speak again, slowly sharing the profound insights into the essence of life that he had accumulated over millennia. But Odin's understanding was fundamentally different from Ego's. If Ego's comprehension of life was entirely self-centered, focused on his own biological expansion and dominance, Odin's understanding was rooted in utilization. It made sense. Ego's life force originated from within himself, his focus was entirely internal. But Odin, he drew his power from the world tree. His mastery of life was about channeling and utilizing an external, cosmic force. So, for Hawk, Odin's teachings opened up a completely new, uncharted territory of understanding. Take notes. Memorize every word. Hawk's expression was deadly serious. He listened intently to every syllable Odin spoke regarding the manipulation and essence of life energy. After all, Odin was about to die. If Hawk missed this opportunity, he would never get another one. Hawk absorbed the knowledge like a sponge. Odin spoke in great detail, holding nothing back, offering his ancient wisdom freely and completely. Time slipped away. In the blink of an eye, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cliffs. Hawk opened his eyes, ensuring every piece of information was permanently etched into his memory, ready to be meditated upon when he returned home. He looked at Odin. Thank you for your guidance. Tell me, what can I do for you in return? Heh. I am about to take my final bow. There is nothing I need to do, and nothing I need you to do for me. Odin looked at Hawk's serious expression and let out a hearty laugh. He shook his head, then fixed his gaze on the younger god. If you are willing, keep an eye on Thor for me. I will. Hawk agreed without a second's hesitation. He looked at the old king, offered a respectful nod, and turned to leave. Just as he was about to step away, Odin called out one last time. Phoenix. God King Odin. Hawk stopped and looked back over his shoulder. Odin's single eye bored into him, intense and warning. Remember. The traps of time are omnipresent. It will not easily allow anyone else to slip its grasp. Chapter 272, 376, The Reality Stone, A Dead End. Gwen had just discovered something incredibly amusing. Standing in the living room of 521A Palm Street, she looked out at the backyard. Hawk was currently stuck. Literally. Half of his body was protruding from a shimmering portal in midair, while the other half remained stubbornly out of sight, as if he were jammed in the fabric of reality itself. She blinked, utterly bewildered. Just as she was beginning to wonder if this was some bizarre new training technique, the rest of him finally popped through. Gwen's face lit up. She slid the patio door open and was about to rush out to meet him when she caught the look on his face. She hesitated for a split second, her smile faltering, but then quickly closed the distance. The moment Hawk saw her, the heavy, brooding tension on his face vanished, replaced by a warm smile as he pulled his new wife into a tight embrace. They held each other in the quiet backyard. Hungry? A little. Let's eat first. Okay. Hawk murmured softly, keeping his arm around her waist as they walked back inside. 2 hours later. Hawk was about to head to his study when he stopped in the doorway of their bedroom. Gwen was sitting on the bed, propped up against the pillows, reading a book. He looked at her, curious. You're not going to ask me what I was doing today? Gwen looked up from her book and offered a serene smile. Nope. Why not? Because I know that if my husband thinks I need to know something, he'll tell me without me having to ask. Hawk's eyebrow arched. He looked at her knowing smile, thought for a moment, then stepped into the room and closed the door. Leaning back against the wood, he crossed his arms and recounted his trip to Norway, his meeting with Odin, and the terrifying truth about the traps of time. Odin couldn't tell Thor or Hela the truth about Ragnarok. If he did, they would become active participants in the prophecy, and their fates would be sealed within the inescapable conclusion time had written for them. Ragnarok meant the consumption of the world tree cosmos by the primary universe. Millions would die, but there would be survivors. If Odin remained silent, Thor and Hela had a chance to be among those survivors. But if he spoke the truth, that chance vanished. They would be locked into the apocalypse. Gwen's situation was fundamentally different. First, even if she knew the cosmic truth, she had no power to alter it. Second, she was a native inhabitant of the primary universe, her timeline was already woven into its fabric. So, Odin couldn't tell his children, but Hawk could tell his wife. Gwen listened intently, her eyes widening in shock. He fell into a temporal trap. Just like the ancient one. Yeah. Holy. Gwen breathed out, closing her book and sitting up straight. She looked at Hawk, who was still leaning against the door. If you fall into a temporal trap, is there really no way out? Hawk shrugged. It's time. No one beats time. Again, time exists simultaneously in the past, present, and future. A temporal trap uses a guaranteed, inescapable future to sever your past. It's an attack that cannot be dodged, blocked, or outrun. Gwen's expression turned dead serious. Hawk. Yeah. You have to be careful. If Odin went out of his way to warn you, it means something. I know. Hawk nodded. Then, a thought struck him, and he shook his head with a bitter laugh. It's all Zeus's fault. Gwen blinked, completely thrown by the sudden hostility toward the Greek god. What does Zeus have to do with this? I thought you said he transcended time. Hawk nodded, looking at her. Exactly. Because he transcended, time is absolutely determined never to let it happen again. In a word, Zeus had pulled the ladder up behind him. It was like the first guy to marry into a rich family, inherit the business, and then immediately change his kids' last names back to his own, ruining the setup for every opportunistic son-in-law who came after him. The pioneer planted the tree, and everyone else burned in the sun. So, it's all Zeus's fault. Then you need to be even more careful. Gwen didn't join him in cursing Zeus. She looked at him with unwavering intensity. You said it yourself. Slow and steady. As long as you don't rush, as long as you don't lose your cool, time can't touch you. Hawk smiled warmly at her words. Stay true to myself. Gwen nodded firmly. Exactly. Stay true to yourself. Don't worry. I won't give it the opening. I'm going to the study. Okay. Gwen nodded and returned to her book. Hawk turned, opened the door, and stepped into the hallway. But the moment the door clicked shut behind him, the smile vanished from his face. In the study, Hawk sat cross-legged on the floor. His consciousness plunged inward, descending into his cosmos until he stood upon the shores of his own river of time. He looked ahead. In the distant reaches of his future, a specific section of the timeline was pulsing with a brilliant, almost blinding light. It was like a siren singing in the dark, constantly, relentlessly trying to seduce him into taking just one little peek. Even just a glance. Hawk remained completely unmoved. He slowly raised his gaze, his cold eyes settling on the two cosmic artifacts that now served as the eyes of his spectral phoenix, the reality stone and the mind stone. The traps of time are omnipresent. Omnipresent. Yes. In fact, you might already have one foot in a trap right now, Phoenix. And you wouldn't even know it. Hawk recalled the final exchange he'd had with Odin on the cliffs of Norway. As the memory echoed in his mind, he stared deeply at the two infinity stones he had collected. Just then, deep within his mind, a door to his past life's memory palace swung open. A single image drifted out, floating to the forefront of his thoughts. It was a picture. A picture of a gauntlet. The Infinity Gauntlet. But not the left-handed one worn by Thanos. This was the right-handed gauntlet displayed prominently in Odin's vault on Asgard. Odin wasn't the type to keep a useless trinket on display just to show off. So, there was only one logical reason the Infinity Gauntlet was in Odin's vault. Odin had tried to use the Infinity Stones to break free from his temporal trap. But in the end, he had abandoned the plan. Maybe it was because of the Soul Stone, which required a horrific sacrifice. Maybe it was because the Reality Stone had been hidden away by his father, Bor. But for a chief god facing the total annihilation of Ragnarok, was a sacrifice for the Soul Stone really a deal-breaker? Was a hidden Reality Stone an insurmountable obstacle? Again, Odin might be a benevolent, weary old man now, but never forget, his throne was built on mountains of corpses and rivers of blood. A single general's success is built on 10,000 bleached bones. Every chief god's throne is soaked in blood. Odin was no exception. So, there was only one conclusion. Odin had forged the Infinity Gauntlet. He had planned to collect the stones to save himself. But during his quest, he had discovered a fatal flaw in the plan, and he had ultimately chosen to abandon it. But what was the flaw? Odin hadn't said. But he had given a warning. The traps of time are omnipresent. Hawk's mind raced. He stared at the phoenix's eyes, glittering with the power of reality and mind, and slowly closed his own. His original plan had been crystal clear. After comprehending the eighth sense, he would merge with the physical phoenix star system that already existed in the primary universe. He would use the immense power generated by manifesting his cosmos to trigger the reality stone, thereby forcing his phoenix universe into complete, physical existence. He had run the simulations. It was flawless. The logic was sound. But now, thinking about Odin's discarded Infinity Gauntlet and his chilling warning about the omnipresence of time's traps, Hawk suddenly realized a horrifying truth. His entire goal was to manifest the Phoenix universe to transcend the primary universe's timeline. But if he followed his original plan, the exact moment he manifested the Phoenix universe would be the exact moment he triggered the ultimate temporal trap. The reason was terrifyingly simple. The Reality Stone. As everyone knows, the Reality Stone is a relic born from the singularity that predates the universe itself. It is a fundamental building block of this reality. Hawk could use the Reality Stone to project the power of his cosmos. But he absolutely could not use it to manifest his actual universe. If he did, he was completely fucked. Learn from history. Hawk recalled a profound truth from the history books of his past life. He who rises by the sword, shall fall by the sword. If he used the Reality Stone to birth his Phoenix universe, then the Reality Stone possessed the fundamental authority to destroy it. Right now, because Hawk's cosmos hadn't fully manifested into physical reality, time couldn't touch him. But the moment he used the Phoenix star system and the Reality Stone to make it real. To put it bluntly, all his hard work would become nothing more than a wedding gift to time itself. He would be handing over control of his own reality to the very force he was trying to escape. But wait. Hawk frowned. He thought of Frigga, who had died because time issued a lethal warning when Odin tried to let Malekith use the Reality Stone to plunge the World Tree cosmos back into darkness. If his new theory was correct, time should have been thrilled with Malekith's plan. If Malekith used the reality stone to rewrite the world tree would have fallen completely under the jurisdiction of the reality stone, and by extension, into the absolute control of time itself. Why would time issue a warning against that? Hawk's mind whirled in a furious brainstorm. Just then, his brow shot up. Eternity is time, but time is not eternity. Eternity has consciousness. Time does not. Time is a cold, mechanical force. Ragnarok was the conclusion assigned by time. Even though using the reality stone to plunge the world tree into darkness would have brought it under time's control, it would have fundamentally altered the assigned conclusion. And doing so would have completely unraveled the established past. Time itself would have fractured. So, even if using the reality stone served time's ultimate purpose, it was a violation of the mechanical rules of reality. Time couldn't accept it. That's why it retaliated. Hiss. The mind stone flared with blinding light. Bathed in the illuminating glow of the mind, Hawk's thoughts crystallized. Having finally unraveled the cosmic puzzle, he sucked in a sharp breath of cold air. The next second, a new daunting question surfaced in his mind. A pop quiz for survival. If using the reality stone to merge with the Phoenix star system was a guaranteed death sentence, a trap set by reality itself, what was his next move? Give up on manifesting his universe entirely? With his current power, he was more than capable of protecting himself and the people he cared about. Or acknowledge the dead end, turn around, and forge a new path. Chapter 273, 377, The Phoenix and the World Tree. Hawk had more than one option when it came to manifesting his Phoenix universe into reality. However, using the existing Phoenix star system as a conduit was undeniably the simplest, most direct route. The Phoenix system was right there. Visible. Tangible. Furthermore, his divine authority was inextricably linked to it. Therefore, using the reality stone in tandem with the physical Phoenix system was the optimal strategy. There was no close second. But right now, this optimal strategy was blocked by a massive, cosmic stop sign. A temporal trap. Granted, this was entirely based on his own deductions following his conversation with Odin. It was all just suspicion. It was entirely possible he was shadowboxing, fighting an enemy that didn't exist, overthinking a problem that wasn't actually there. But once again, detectives need evidence to build a case. Hawk only needed a suspicion to change his plans. The mere possibility of a trap was enough to make him hit the brakes. After all, he only had one shot at this. The moment he initiated the manifestation of the Phoenix universe, there was no going back. If he realized halfway through that he had stepped into a trap, there was no Ctrl+Z, he couldn't just hit undo. The sheer, catastrophic amount of energy released by the birth of a universe meant that even Hawk wouldn't be able to reel it back in once the process began. So, he had one chance to get it right. This was a war of ascension. A dispute over resources or territory can be negotiated. You sit down, you hash out a deal. But a dispute over the fundamental laws of reality. Over divine ascension. That is a fight to the absolute, bitter end. Either you die. Or I die. There is no middle ground, no compromise, no third option. Hawk wasn't about to abandon his plan to manifest his own universe. Sure, giving up might temporarily avoid a direct conflict with time, allowing him to live out his days in relative peace. But what kind of life would that be? Living on borrowed time, constantly looking over his shoulder. There's an old saying, better a coward's life than a hero's death. But there's another saying, I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. Are kings and generals born to their stations? So, the only power you can truly rely on is the power you hold in your own two hands. Pinning your hopes for survival on the mercy of another is a fool's errand. And most importantly, even if he surrendered, time wouldn't let him go. Unless he willingly accepted whatever predetermined death time had scripted for him, even if it was millions of years in the future, time would never truly be at ease. Look at the Ancient One. Look at Odin. In short, surrendering meant losing everything. That path was closed. He needed a new route. Having decided to play a winner-takes-all game of cosmic chicken with time, Hawk sat cross-legged above his shimmering river of time. The Mind Stone flared with brilliant light as he continued to process the profound insights into life he had gleaned from Odin, initiating another intense brainstorming session. The core mechanism for manifesting his Phoenix universe was actually quite straightforward. It was the same principle Odin had used to invade the primary universe eons ago. Both he and Odin needed an anchor point, a fulcrum, that already existed within the primary universe. Only then could they project their external power into this reality. Hawk had initially chosen the reality stone. By shining the light of his cosmo through the reality stone, he could manifest his power into the physical world. Odin had chosen Midgard, Earth. By severing Midgard from the world tree and dropping it into the primary universe, Earth became his anchor, allowing the power system of the Yggdrasil cosmos to exist in this new reality. Unfortunately, Odin had been outplayed by time. He lost the war before it even began. But that wasn't the point. The point was, Hawk's core method for manifesting his Cosmo was fundamentally identical to Odin's strategy of using Earth to manifest the power of the World Tree. He still needed an anchor. His original plan was to use the Reality Stone as that anchor. But what if he didn't use the Reality Stone? Were there other options? Yes. Mephisto had mentioned one. He could use the Heaven Dimension as his fulcrum to manifest the Phoenix universe. Yahweh answered to the Celestials. And the Celestials answered to eternity, created by the abstract entity of time itself to maintain temporal order across the primary multiverse. Therefore, Yahweh's Heaven Dimension, while a separate realm, possessed the fundamental characteristics of the primary multiverse. That was exactly why Mephisto, after conquering heaven, was able to use it as a staging ground to expand his hellish dominion across the wider multiverse. But Mephisto could use it. Hawk couldn't. Thinking about Yahweh's Heaven Dimension, Hawk couldn't help but feel a profound sense of relief. He had originally tossed heaven to Mephisto out of sheer disgust, convinced that Yahweh, having already pulled that stunt with the blood god dimension, was a devious, scheming old bastard. Thankfully he had trusted his gut. If he had used heaven as his anchor, he would have stepped right into time's trap. Because even if the heaven dimension had been flawless, untainted by any of Yahweh's hidden traps, it was still unusable. At its core, the heaven dimension belonged to the temporal jurisdiction of eternity. Using it as a fulcrum would be like willingly locking himself inside a cage and handing time the key. So, setting heaven aside, were there any other viable anchors? The answer was yes. There were. Just not very many. Hawk calmed his mind, clearly outlining the two non-negotiable requirements for his ideal anchor. First, it had to exist within the primary universe. This was mandatory. If it didn't exist in the primary universe, manifesting the Phoenix universe through it wouldn't project his power into this reality. Second, it could not be bound by the temporal laws of the primary universe. This was also self-explanatory. What was the entire point of manifesting his own universe? To be the boss. The absolute ruler. If he manifested his universe only to discover that the primary universe's time still held jurisdiction over him, what was the point of all this effort? He might as well just surrender, negotiate a plea deal with time, and settle for a painless death a billion years from now. So, the anchor he needed must physically exist within the primary universe, but operate completely outside its temporal flow. As Hawk mentally reviewed his criteria, a single name snapped into his consciousness. The World Tree. Odin had used Midgard as a sacrifice to ensure the power of the Yggdrasil system could manifest in the primary universe. Therefore, the World Tree cosmos technically existed within the framework of the primary universe. Simultaneously, the World Tree operated on its own independent timeline, completely separate from the primary universe's temporal flow. At least, it would remain separate until Ragnarok concluded. Therefore, the World Tree perfectly fit every single criteria Hawk required for an anchor to manifest the Phoenix universe. There's just one minor problem. What problem? The next morning, Gwen, busy preparing breakfast in the kitchen, listened to Hawk's explanation. She paused, turning from the stove to look at him. Sitting on a bar stool at the kitchen island, Hawk chuckled and met her gaze. You told me to play it slow and steady. Remember? Stepping into the ring and stealing the World Tree right out from under time's nose. That's not playing it slow and steady. That's a declaration of all-out war. To time, the World Tree was already a guaranteed prize. Odin was about to take his final bow. Once the prescripted events of Ragnarok played out exactly as time had arranged, the independent cosmos of the World Tree would cease to exist, fully absorbed into the primary universe. But if Hawk intervened and claimed it for himself, he would literally be snatching the prize from time's grasp. It was the cosmic equivalent of stealing meat from a tiger's mouth. Gwen listened to Hawk's explanation. She finished slicing the bread, popped the pieces into the toaster, and turned to face him fully, her emerald eyes meeting his. Can you take it? What? Hawk raised an eyebrow. Gwen shrugged, her expression calm. Can you guarantee you can actually take the World Tree? Hawk frowned, considering the question for a moment. Absolutely. Before his conversation with Odin, Hawk had assumed that all the temporal traps were being set by Eternity himself. But Odin had clarified the truth. The traps weren't the conscious work of Eternity, they were the instinctual, automated defense mechanisms of time itself. It wasn't Eternity. It was just time. So, as long as Eternity didn't personally intervene, as long as it was just the mechanical forces of time, he was absolutely confident he could snatch the prize. Hawk had previously stated he had no interest in getting involved in the messy business of Ragnarok. The high EQ explanation, circumstances change. The low EQ explanation, before, getting involved offered zero reward and massive risk. Now, the reward was the key to his ultimate ascension. Of course, high reward always comes with high risk. If he didn't use the world tree as his anchor, he could manifest his inner cosmos the moment he fully comprehended the eighth sense. But if he committed to using the world tree, the eighth sense wouldn't be enough. To push the Phoenix universe into reality through that specific anchor, he would have to awaken the ninth sense, the unbreakable. The ninth sense. The absolute pinnacle of power in the original lore designed by Masami Kurumada. As for why using the world tree necessitated awakening the ninth sense, the reason was simple. Hawk looked at Gwen's confused expression, thought for a moment, and offered an analogy. Think of it this way. If I don't use the world tree, the barrier keeping my universe inside me is like an eggshell. A light tap from the inside, the shell breaks, and I'm out. But if I use the world tree as my anchor, well, then I'm trying to hatch a phoenix. Gwen blinked, still confused. Hawk tried again. A crocodile. A baby crocodile hatching. Gwen's face lit up with understanding. She didn't know much about the biology of a mythical phoenix. But she knew crocodiles. Crocodile eggs are incredibly tough. While a few unusually strong hatchlings might be able to break out on their own, many simply can't. They rely on their mother to gently pick the egg up in her jaws and carefully crack the shell with her teeth to help them emerge. Gwen still looked puzzled. Why does adding the world tree make it so much harder to hatch? The reason is clear. Which is? Hawk looked at her confused, beautiful face, and a soft, enigmatic smile touched his lips. The phoenix graces only the most sacred of lands, and rests upon no branch but the parasol tree. And the world tree? It can be my parasol tree. Chapter 274, 378, The Cost of Stepping into the Ring. It is a universal truth. People differ from one another. By that exact logic, not all phoenixes are created equal. A phoenix standing on the ground belongs to a completely different breed than one perched on a branch. There's an old saying, a living dog is better than a dead lion. Only a bird resting on the sacred parasol tree can truly be called a phoenix. The phoenix appears only in the most sacred places and never sits on any branch except the parasol. Its cry is powerful enough to shake the world. Hawk possessed the power to use almost any cosmic anchor to manifest his phoenix universe. Such an act would constitute a mere quantitative increase in power. Using a tree changed the entire equation. Claiming the world tree as his fulcrum brought about a fundamental qualitative evolution. This reality explained his previous assessment. Using the world tree required understanding the ninth sense, the unbreakable. The unbreakable did not even exist as a concept for him before he considered claiming Yggdrasil. He had felt absolute certainty that his ascension would finish with the eighth sense. The moment the idea of hijacking the world tree crossed his mind, the path to the ninth sense appeared before his inner eye. He lacked no desire to reach the unbreakable. The truth remained far simpler. The ninth sense required the world tree to exist. A phoenix demands its sacred branch. Without it, he would remain grounded. A grounded bird lacks true divinity. Gwen listened intently to his explanation. Hawk had detailed the details of the sixth, seventh, and eighth senses to her before. She lacked a visceral, personal understanding of those cosmic thresholds. One fact stood out with crystal clarity. The world tree held immeasurable importance for his future. Then go get it, Gwen stated with an even tone. Hawk blinked, his focus snapping back to her face. Gwen offered a casual shrug. The world tree gives you what you need, right? It does. Then take it back from them. Doing that means declaring all-out war on time itself. We are already enemies of time. Gwen smiled, tucking a stray blonde lock behind her ear as she caught his eye. My husband never hesitates like this when facing an enemy. Hawk let out a soft laugh and shook his head. This one is different. How is it different? You told me you do not fear time. I fear nothing for myself. He spoke with total confidence. He was strong enough to stay safe, even if eternity showed up in person to attack him. He could always escape. He had made his own timeline into a single point. If he couldn't beat eternity in a direct fight, he would just pull back. Once he was out of eternity's view, the cosmic being would never be able to find him again. Hawk locked his piercing gaze onto her face. I worry about you. Me. Gwen paused, genuinely surprised. Yes. Hawk nodded, his voice falling to a serious register. Think about Peter and Felicia. Gwen's brow knitted. Are you saying time will remove me from existence? It lacks the power to do that. You are my wife. You exist as a permanent fixture in my past, my present, and my future. Hawk shook his head. Then what can it do? It can displace you. Time can rip you away from my side and drop you onto an Earth in a parallel universe, exactly like it did to our Peter and Felicia. Time possessed that specific capability. It had proven its reach the moment Earth plunged fully into the primary temporal current. The abstract entity of time could reverse events that included eternity or the time stone, which could not be altered. The raw mechanical force of time operated on a supreme level. It held this power without restriction and would utilize it as a weapon with absolute certainty the moment Hawk made his play for the world tree. Entering the ring for a direct confrontation meant exposing himself to the full, unmitigated wrath of time. Such an act moved past mere rebellion and constituted a direct assault on the one above all. Time might lack true omnipotence, but its retaliation would be devastating. Time could not harm him directly. It would target the most intimate connection anchoring his timeline instead. Gwen served as the absolute center of his existence. She was his wife. The good news remained clear. Hawk possessed a fundamentally different nature from Odin, and Gwen was nothing like Frigga. Time could not orchestrate Gwen's death. The bad news carried equal importance. Time could banish Gwen to the multiverse and erase her from the memories of anyone not deeply entangled with Hawk's personal timeline. The rest of the world had overlooked Peter and Felicia. The mechanical force of time could execute a flawless memory wipe across reality. Time lacked emotion, and that lack of emotion guaranteed a cold, calculated response. Threatening its core interests would trigger an automated, ruthless countermeasure designed to force his compliance. Hawk kept his expression grave as he looked at her. The moment I enter this fight, I risk losing you. Gwen bit her lip and tilted her head, her face twisting into a strange, amused look. Losing me sounds a bit too melodramatic for a Tuesday morning, honey. I am entirely serious, Gwen. I know you are. Gwen let out a soft chuckle. The playful demeanor vanished, replaced by an intensity that matched his own. 3 questions. 1. Will I die? No. 2. Will I forget you, or will you forget me? Never. Last question. If I get dumped onto an Earth in a parallel universe, will you track me down and bring me home? Absolutely. Then go steal the world tree. Time is a bully. It killed the Sorcerer Supreme just to drag Earth into its current. It orchestrated Ragnarok across the world tree to prevent anyone from escaping its control. It has its sights set on you now. Stealing the world tree guarantees it will use me as leverage. Refusing to steal the tree changes nothing. It will still use me as leverage to prevent your final ascension. You must take the world tree. My temporary absence means nothing. Compromising once guarantees a lifetime of surrender. Do not give it the satisfaction of thinking it can control you. Not even with my life on the line. Gwen spoke gently but with steady determination. She gave him a playful grin. Besides, you promised I'd survive and remember everything. Being sent somewhere else for a while doesn't sound so bad. I'm actually curious to see what a parallel Earth is like compared to ours. A new, amusing thought seemed to strike her. She blinked her eyes in rapid succession and looked up at him. Do you think there is another version of you running around in this parallel universe? The multiverse contains infinite variations outside of our primary reality. Some Earths have variants of us. Others do not. A variant of you is bound to exist out there, alongside a variant of me. You sound incredibly certain. Gwen tilted her head, intrigued by his swift confirmation. Hawk offered a faint smile. Do you dream? What does dreaming have to do with parallel universes? The version of yourself you see in your dreams is an actual projection of your multiverse variant. Doctor Strange often dreamt of his alternate selves fleeing from monstrous creatures across shattered dimensions. Seeing yourself in a dream usually means you are witnessing the life of a parallel variant. Hawk rejected the notion that those multiversal variants held any true connection to his own identity. His existence was an absolute singularity. The origin of his soul guaranteed his unique, unparalleled status across all realities. A parallel variant of him might exist, but that variant shared nothing of his real essence. The same rule applied to her. Those alternate versions of you are not you. Explain that. Gwen held his gaze. Hawk stared back with resolute intensity. Only you hold the title of Mrs. Phoenix. You are entirely irreplaceable. Gwen blinked, took a half step backward, and performed a theatrical curtsy. Thank you, Mr. Phoenix. Hawk laughed out loud. A sharp chime from the toaster interrupted the moment. Gwen turned her attention back to what she was doing. She laughed, grabbed the toasted bread, spread a thick layer of butter, spun smoothly, and handed the slice to Hawk. He took a bite, his eyes lighting up in a flash. A new recipe. It is. Gwen lowered her voice. My mother knows nothing about this secret formula. Consider this the very first exclusive recipe of the Phoenix family. Only those bearing our name get to taste it. Hawk devoured the slice of bread in 3 quick bites. Gwen beamed at his reaction. Did that fill you up? It did. Hawk nodded. Gwen's smile grew radiant. Then go to work. Promise me you will not let time steal our world tree. Hawk looked deep into her meaningful eyes and remained quiet for a long moment. Promise me, Hawk. I promise. He gave his word under her intense scrutiny. With a final urging from his wife, he turned and vanished from the kitchen. Gwen gazed at the empty space he left behind. She blinked, drew in a long, steadying breath, and untied her apron. She tossed the fabric onto the counter and strode toward the stairs. A moment passed. Gwen reached the master bedroom. Grabbing her charging phone from the nightstand, she opened her contacts list and initiated a call. The connection went through without delay. Wanda. Do you have time to go shopping with me today? Chapter 275, 379, Eitri the Dwarf King. In the minds of humanity, the solar system is a relatively simple concept. It consists of the Sun, 8 major planets, and a smattering of asteroids and comets. Vast, mysterious, and unquestionably lonely. In the primary universe, this isolation was an objective truth. Earth was the only planet in the solar system capable of supporting life. At least, it was, before Earth's timeline fully detached from the world tree and plunged into the temporal current of the primary universe. But now, hovering in the void of space, Hawk stared at a spectral, impossibly massive tree that was beginning to flicker into existence right before his eyes. The world tree, Yggdrasil. And clinging to its branches, like ripe fruit, were the realms of the Norse gods. Asgard, home to Odin and the Aesir. Vanaheim, home to the Vanir, and Frigga's birthplace. And the other remaining realms. Originally, Yggdrasil supported 9 realms. But Midgard had been severed. It was now fully, irrevocably Earth. With the loss of Midgard, the foundational stability of the world tree had been shattered. Now, as the temporal current of the primary universe invaded, the entire cosmos of Yggdrasil was destabilizing, phasing in and out of accordance with the primary reality. Every time it appeared, it meant the primary universe was gaining ground. Every time it faded, it was a fervent act of resistance by the world tree itself. Unfortunately, the loss of Midgard was like severing the taproot of a mighty tree. And the invasion of the primary universe's timeline was like a swarm of locusts descending upon the dying leaves. With every shudder of the world tree, its cosmic light waned. When Ragnarok finally arrived, it would be the lumberjack's axe striking the trunk. Once the tree fell, nothing would stop the primary universe from completely assimilating its remains. But Hawk had no intention of intervening. Whether he planned to claim the world tree for himself or not, he wasn't going to make a move right now. The reason was simple. Just like he only had one chance to manifest his Phoenix universe, he only had one chance to steal the world tree. The moment he made his move, he would instantly expose himself to time. So, his timing had to be perfect. His execution had to be ruthless. Because just as the world tree resisted assimilation by the primary universe, it would absolutely resist being conquered by Hawk. What about cutting a deal with Odin? It wasn't that Hawk didn't want to. He did. But it was pointless. Once again, Odin ruled the world tree cosmos, but he did not own it. In short, Odin couldn't just hand over the keys to the kingdom. If Odin had that kind of authority, the world tree wouldn't have grown dissatisfied with him after the loss of Midgard and started looking for a replacement chief god. And if the world tree hadn't turned against him, the primary universe wouldn't have found the opening it needed to invade. Time is merciless. And the world tree is no different. Therefore, Hawk's role wasn't to play the savior. He was the opportunist. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Hawk was going to be the oriole. And most importantly, even if Odin could just hand him the world tree, Hawk wouldn't accept it. He wanted a world tree that belonged entirely to him, not a hand-me-down from a dying king. He wasn't Asgard's savior, and he certainly wasn't their babysitter. His friendship with Thor was strictly personal. A competent chief god doesn't let personal feelings dictate cosmic strategy. Look at Zeus. So, he wasn't here today to steal the world tree. He was here for Nidavellir. More specifically, he was here for his gold cloth. After meditating on the insights into life he had gleaned from Ego and Odin, Hawk hadn't achieved a complete, qualitative breakthrough into the 8th sense. But he had accumulated a massive, quantitative leap in understanding. And that was more than enough to finally forge the true, physical phoenix gold cloth he had been dreaming of. Normally, because the world tree cosmos existed parallel to, but independent of, the primary universe, the only way to reach Nidavellir was via the Bifrost. But that was no longer the case. The primary universe was actively invading the world tree. Every time Yggdrasil phased into this reality, it created a temporary, physical bridge between the two cosmos. Speaking of which, according to the timeline, this should be right around the time Thanos paid a visit to Nidavellir to force Eitri to forge the Infinity Gauntlet, right? After all, when Thanos intercepted the Asgardian refugee ship right after Ragnarok, he was already wearing the gauntlet. Hawk hovered in the void, waiting for the perfect moment to slip into the world tree space, his mind wandering. But Thanos probably wasn't coming today. Xander hadn't been destroyed yet, which meant Thanos didn't have the Power Stone. Then again, maybe he was wrong. Maybe Xander was already burning, and Thanos was currently en route with the Power Stone in hand. A trace of concern crossed Hawk's mind, and he instinctively glanced toward the sector of space where Xander was located. He had no intention of actually going there to check. Well, if he hadn't decided to steal the World Tree, he might have popped over just to make sure. Gwen's prenatal care was all set up at the hospital on Xander. If Thanos destroyed Xander now, he wouldn't just be destroying a planet, he'd be personally inconveniencing Hawk's wife. Where was Gwen supposed to get her checkups? But right now, he was committed to the World Tree heist. Everything else was secondary. So, Xander was on its own. Hawk refocused his attention. Just then. VMMMM. The fabric of spacetime in the primary universe quivered violently. The colossal, spectral image of the World Tree materialized, its roots and branches spanning the cosmos. For a brief window, the 8 realms were perfectly aligned and physically accessible from the primary universe. Now. Whoosh. Hawk focused his cosmo, transforming into a streak of gleaming light. He passed through the dimensional barrier without any resistance and shot straight toward Nidavellir. From the outside, Nidavellir looked exactly like what it was, a forge. But it was a forge on a stellar scale. The structure of Nidavellir was unique. Its core was a massive, solid metallic sphere, surrounded by an unimaginably complex system of concentric, mechanical Dyson rings. These rings acted as the engine, channeling the power of a fading star to fuel the realm's colossal forge. Because of its purpose, Nidavellir had no mountains, no rivers, and certainly no vegetation. From top to bottom, inside and out, it was a great expanse of gargantuan machinery. Chilly metal floors, gears the size of cities, massive pressure valves, thundering conveyor belts, mountains of raw, exotic ores, and a staggering display wall of weapon molds. This was Nidavellir, where every creation was guaranteed to be a god-tier artifact. Odin's spear, Gungnir. Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. The destroyer armor. The right-handed infinity gauntlet sitting in Odin's vault. These were just a few of the legendary items forged in these fires. And the master behind them all was Eitri, the Dwarf King. Calling them dwarves was the greatest misnomer in the 9 realms. They really should have been called giants. Every single member of the dwarf race was massive. Why they were called dwarves was a mystery, perhaps whoever named them had a very twisted sense of irony. An average dwarf stood between 8 and 10 feet tall, and Eitri, the Dwarf King, was a towering 10 foot 2. He was an absolute behemoth. Hawk, at a very respectable 6'1" and built like a fighter, looked like a toddler standing next to him. But Eitri didn't underestimate Hawk because of his size. Because while size can be deceiving, power cannot. The moment Hawk touched down on Nidavellir, he didn't bother masking his presence. He fully unleashed the aura of the phoenix. The surrounding dwarves felt the oppressive, suffocating heat of his cosmo and shared a single scary thought. This is a god. A true god. Because of this, Hawk was escorted directly to Eitri without any hassle. When he arrived, Eitri was wielding a hammer the size of a minivan, relentlessly pounding a glowing, white-hot block of URU metal. This was forging on a scale that exceeded human comprehension. With every strike of Eitri's hammer, Hawk could feel the solid metal floor of the realm vibrating beneath his feet. Hawk didn't interrupt the Dwarf King's work. He waited patiently, passing the time by studying the massive, cliff-like wall where countless weapon molds were displayed. His eyes immediately found the mold for the Infinity Gauntlet. The right hand. Clearly, this was the mold used for the gauntlet in Odin's vault, not the left-handed one Thanos would eventually wear. It made sense. Thanos must have attacked Xander, secured the Power Stone, and then come to Nidavellir. Using the stone, he would have forced Eitri to create a new, left-handed mold for his own Infinity Gauntlet before ambushing the Asgardian refugee ship. TSK, Thanos really is a dishonorable piece of work. Hawk thought to himself. Logically, Thanos must have used the lives of the other dwarves as leverage to force Eitri to build the gauntlet. Build this for me, and I spare your people. That was the only way Eitri would have ever agreed to forge a weapon for a monster like Thanos. If Thanos had just shown up and slaughtered everyone first, leaving only Eitri alive, Eitri would have told him to go to hell. You murder my entire race, and you expect me to build you a weapon. Do I look like an idiot? So, Thanos had to have made a promise. And what was the result? Eitri built the gauntlet. Thanos immediately broke his word, slaughtered the remaining 299 dwarves, and while he technically let Eitri live, he encased his hands in solid metal, ensuring the greatest smith in the universe could never forge another weapon. It was a masterclass in psychological torture. But it was completely classless. A real man can be ruthless, brutal, and even wicked, but he never breaks his word. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. As Hawk was lost in thought. Clang. With a deafening strike, the 10-foot-tall, heavily bearded, and gruff-looking dwarf king lowered his massive hammer. He turned, looking down at Hawk standing a short distance away, his voice deep. "What is it you want me to forge?" "A sacred armor." Chapter 276, 380, Houses make a town, but citizens make a city. To do good work, one must first sharpen their tools. Hawk had only a tiny window of opportunity to steal the world tree. His only chance would come at the precise moment the world tree was cut, the instant the temporal current of the main universe completely broke through its defenses. Fully. Holding nothing back. He couldn't just burn his cosmo, he had to make it explode in a total, unrestrained burst of power. Only then would he have a real chance to grab the world tree from time itself. Because time moves fast. The blink of an eye. But no matter how fast time is, it can never be faster than the moment of the Big Bang. The logic is simple. First comes time, then comes life. But the universe predates time itself. If the Big Bang hadn't occurred, then life, space, and even time would simply not exist. Therefore, the moment of cosmic detonation is, and always will be, faster than time. There was just one problem. Hawk had to identify that exact, microscopic fraction of a second and, simultaneously, trigger the unreserved detonation of his cosmo. To survive that, he needed his armor. A suit of armor perfectly attuned to his very soul. The Phoenix gold cloth. As the saying goes, only a saint clad in their cloth is a true saint. He had adamantium, harvested from the unborn celestial Tiamat, to serve as his stardust sand. He had the ultimate, golden life energy, also extracted from Tiamat, to serve as his gamanium. And he had mountains of URU metal, secured in an equal exchange with Eitri the dwarf king, to serve as his orichalcum. And above it all, high above in the vast Nidavellir forge, the glowing image of the true phoenix cloth hovered, looking almost alive. Scree. The phantom phoenix seemed to understand exactly what Hawk intended to do with it, letting out a series of sharp, metallic, resonant cries. A man without a heart cannot live. The same is true for the phoenix. Only a phoenix perched upon the sacred parasol tree is a true phoenix. The booming voice of Eitri the dwarf king echoed through the forge, directing his massive kin as they took their positions. The molds for the phoenix gold cloth were taking shape at a visible rate. But to Hawk, that visible rate was completely subjective. He had already been in Nidavellir for 3 days. The only reason the dwarf's progress seemed fast was because his mind was elsewhere. Hawk's heart was in turmoil. He stood off to the side, his face perfectly calm as he watched the dwarves work with a wild energy that seemed inspired by the phoenix itself. In truth, he almost wished the molds would take more time. Deep down, Hawk didn't want to steal the world tree. Not if he had a choice. But Gwen was right. Time wouldn't back down just because he tried to be good. Unless he gave up and accepted the ending time had set for him, nothing would change. So, even though Hawk was sure that if he stole the world tree, an angry, vengeful time would target the person closest to him and destroy them, he had no choice. Houses make a town, but citizens make a city. It was an ancient strategic truth, and the fundamental reason Hawk never accepted threats, never tolerated ultimatums, and never allowed anyone to test his boundaries. Hawk watched quietly, and to him, the dwarf's frantic work seemed to move in slow motion. He pictured a woman who had been by his side since the beginning, who had seen him grow, but who would soon be apart from him. She was always gentle and kind. His wife. Back on Earth. Gwen. I don't get it. Wanda, after 3 days of shopping trips with Gwen and ending up back at 521 A Palm Street cooking together, finally reached her breaking point. Wanda frowned, staring at a handwritten recipe card in her hand. Phoenix sauce number 1. Ingredients: blueberries, strawberries. Instructions. Wanda looked completely confused. She glanced at the ingredients on the counter, then at Gwen, who had just tied an apron around her waist. This is your secret recipe. Why are you giving it to me? Gwen smiled softly at Wanda's confusion. Sharing is caring. Sharing. Wanda met Gwen's bright green eyes. For the past 3 days, Gwen had been acting a little strange. During these 3 days, Gwen had shared a lot with her. But the central theme of every conversation had been the same. Hawk. Wanda had listened as Gwen talked about Hawk's personal life. His habits. What he liked. What he hated. At first, Wanda didn't think much of it. She thought that with Hawk gone, Gwen just wanted someone to talk to about her husband. It was totally normal. Mrs. Zhang, who lived next door in Westview, would constantly complain about her husband while their kids played at the park. She'd complain that he was always away on missions for days at a time, and even when he was home on leave, he was so stressed about work that he was practically a ghost. And the Russian lady 2 houses down, once Mrs. Zhang got her started, would complain about her husband, too. She'd say he drank too much, never knew when to stop, and once, when they were snowed in at a cabin and ran out of vodka, he even drank antifreeze. So Wanda had initially assumed Gwen was just blowing off steam. But now, Wanda looked down at the secret recipe for Phoenix sauce number 1. Alarm bells started ringing in her head. Because, while sharing recipes is common worldwide, in America, a secret family recipe was just that, a closely guarded secret kept by the head of the family. It was the kind of thing you never gave away, Northwest matter how close you were to someone. For example, if a guy's best friend was absolutely obsessed with his wife's famous pot roast, even if the guy begged his wife to share the recipe, she would sooner invite the friend over for dinner every single night than hand over the instructions. So, Gwen's sharing of her secret recipe, along with her casual, sharing is caring, comment, made Wanda feel very uneasy. When she thought about the oddly specific talks they'd had over the past 3 days, a very bad feeling settled in Wanda's stomach. Gwen, what's going on? Nothing's going on. Gwen shrugged casually. Jean, Billy, and Tommy are part of the Phoenix family too. If you learn how to make this, you can make it for them. Wanda looked suspicious and doubtful. Is that it? Really? Of course. Gwen smiled. Plus, if I don't come home for a while, you'll be able to make it for Hawk. Wanda raised an eyebrow. She noticed the important phrase. Wait. What do you mean, if you don't come home? Overtime. Gwen looked at Wanda and let out a light laugh. My research project is hitting a critical phase. I'm probably going to have to pull some serious overtime at the lab in the coming weeks. I might not make it home much. So, I figured, while things are still relatively quiet, I'd have you over. That way, if I really get swamped, I can ask you to check in on Hawk. You have no idea how terrible he is at taking care of himself. If I don't remind him, he'll literally go 3 days without remembering to eat. Gwen seamlessly transitioned into complaining about Hawk's lack of domestic survival skills. Hearing the explanation, the suspicion in Wanda's eyes began to fade. She knew Gwen had a lab at Stark Industries. And before the wedding, Gwen had told her how crazy the hours could get when an experiment was in full swing. So, hearing that Gwen just wanted a backup plan to make sure Hawk didn't starve while she was working late, Wanda's anxiety subsided. But one question remained. Wanda looked at Gwen, a little hesitant. I don't mind helping out. But, does Hawk know about this arrangement? I run this house. People who can't even remember to feed themselves don't get a vote in domestic management. Gwen smiled, delivering the line with boss lady confidence. Then, she pointed at the recipe card in Wanda's hand, smoothly changing the subject. Anyway, let's not worry about that right now. I might not even have to work late. Come on, let's start with sauce number 1. Hawk loves this stuff. He basically has the palate of a 5-year-old. Once you learn it, you can make it for Jean, Billy, and Tommy, too. All right. Wanda was still a little hesitant, unable to shake the feeling that something was slightly off, but she nodded and started helping Gwen prepare the Phoenix sauce number 1. Of course. It wasn't just sauce number 1. After Wanda had successfully recreated the signature Phoenix family sauce on her own, Gwen pulled out several more recipe cards. Time ticked steadily on. The dwarves hammered away, clang, clang, clang. Hours slipped by, though to Hawk, lost in his thoughts, it felt like mere seconds. Finally, the molds for the Phoenix gold cloth were complete. It was time for the true forging to begin. Eitri the Dwarf King, having prepared himself physically and mentally, channeling his absolute peak focus into creating a weapon the likes of which the universe had never seen, turned his gaze to Hawk. Hawk had been standing there, silent and still, 4 days. If you're ready, we can begin. Hawk snapped out of his detached state and looked at Eitri. The next moment, his previously unfocused pupils rapidly contracted, bringing the world back into immediate clarity. Hawk's eyes scanned the carefully arranged exotic materials and the large, detailed molds for his armor. A spark lit up in his eyes. He took a deep breath to steady himself, then locked eyes with Eitri, showing complete, unwavering calm. He nodded once with determination. Let's do this. Chapter 277, 381, The First Covenant of the Phoenix. At the center of Nidavellir was a decaying star, captured and harnessed to provide a limitless, eternal power source for the Forge's massive Dyson rings. The fire of a star never truly dies. And neither did the Forges of Nidavellir. Eitri was fond of saying, unless the dwarven race is entirely wiped from existence, the fires of Nidavellir will never be extinguished. But today, the fires of Nidavellir were going out. Because the fire of a dying star was insufficient to forge a true, authentic gold cloth for a gold saint. Hawk hovered above the Dyson rings, staring at the blazing star caged inside the structure. The star burned fiercely. Its heat, strong enough to melt any known metal, was directed through a series of focusing lenses straight into the huge smelting vats of the forge. Hawk glanced at the whirling fire, then looked up and met Eitree's eyes across the wide, metallic space of the forge. His voice was perfectly calm. Shut it down. If we shut down the stellar intake, and the energy you provide fails to meet the required forging threshold, your weapon will be irreparably ruined. I know. Hawk gave a faint smile, keeping eye contact with the Dwarf King across the great distance. Shut it down. I must be out of my mind. No, you just don't have a choice. It was true, Eitree the Dwarf King really didn't have a choice. He had made countless legendary artifacts, but most were made only for the Aesir of Asgard. Because the dwarves of Nidavellir were the personal, exclusive blacksmiths of Odin. When Hawk had first arrived, Eitree had listened to his request and rejected it without a second's hesitation. Hawk might be a god. But he was a foreign god. And Nidavellir did not forge weapons for anyone outside the Aesir pantheon. Eitree had almost shouted his refusal. Nidavellir is bound by an eternal, sacred covenant with Odin, the All-Father. The All-Father protects Nidavellir, and in return, Nidavellir swears eternal fealty to Odin. We will never forge for an outside. Hawk could swear on his life that what happened next was not embellished in the slightest. Because at that exact moment, just as Eitree was shouting about their eternal covenant with Odin, before the Dwarf King could even finish his sentence, Odin died. Don't ask how they knew Odin had died on Earth when they were light years away on Nidavellir. Odin was the chief god of the world tree cosmos. The fall of such a powerful king never goes unnoticed. It causes cosmic events. The moment the chief god took his last breath, a deep surge of sorrow swept across all of the 9 realms. Eitree, with his face contorted in a furious roar, was suddenly struck by a wave of sorrow. He froze immediately, his mouth still agape. Hawk looked at the stunned, frozen Dwarf King and spoke in a flat tone. So, do you think you might need to consider signing a new contract with a different chief god? Yes. Eitree looked at the Bifrost, where he had just seen Loki and Thor thrown into space. He saw Hela, the goddess of death, walking up the rainbow bridge with her spiked headdress. Hawk's steady words resonated in his mind. He snapped out of his daze instantly. His anger disappeared. He quickly started giving orders to his kin. In minutes, they found the old mold used for the covenant with Odin, made a new contract, and gave it to Hawk. A wise man submits to circumstance. And more importantly, while the rest of the 9 realms might not have known about the coming doom of Ragnarok, the dwarves of Nidavellir did. Long ago, Odin had come to Nidavellir and told them the truth about Ragnarok, hoping they might forge a weapon capable of stopping it. This explained perfectly why, when Ragnarok eventually came to pass in the original timeline, Eitree was the only dwarf left alive. After all, if you know about Ragnarok, and you are a part of the world tree cosmos, you are inherently caught in the crosshairs of Ragnarok. Sadly, the dwarves couldn't make a weapon to stop the apocalypse, so they couldn't help Odin. But they were certain of one thing: Ragnarok would start the moment Odin died. However, the key point was that Nidavellir's covenant was signed directly with Odin. And now, Odin was dead. Ragnarok was here. And Hawk was standing right in front of them. So, adapt and submit to changing circumstances. The new covenant proposed by the dwarves was simple and straightforward. Hawk was required to provide 2 things. Protection for Nidavellir. A continuous and unrestricted availability of premium alcohol for its population. In exchange, Nidavellir would become a signatory of the new covenant. They would become Hawk's exclusive blacksmiths, forging any weapon or artifact he required. Of course, Hawk had to bring the raw materials. Also, if he asked for something impossible to make, he couldn't use that as a reason to break the agreement. Hawk skimmed the terms and, without hesitation, signed his divine name. Phoenix. Once the vivid phoenix symbol appeared on the contract, sealing the agreement, Hawk looked back at Eitree and said, "Let's get to work." Eitree had immediately united his people to begin forging the molds for the sacred armor. Back to the present. Hearing Hawk say, "No, you just don't have a choice," Eitree let out a bitter, resigned chuckle and shook his head. "Do it." Hawk ordered, his voice making it clear there was no room for argument. Eitree didn't waste any more breath. He turned and gave a sharp nod to the dwarf operating the primary controls of the Dyson ring. The dwarf received the signal and threw the massive release lever. VMMMM. The blinding light of the stellar forge beneath Hawk's feet began to extinguish at a visible rate. In the blink of an eye, the blinding fire vanished completely, revealing the forge's true form, a colossal metallic sphere. But the sphere was merely a protective shell. And what was it protecting? The captured, dying star burning intensely within its core. Hawk's next step was simple, but also reckless. He had to phase through the protective shell, dive directly into the heart of the continuously burning star, detonate his cosmo to its absolute limit, and replace the star's natural fire with his own phoenix fire. Hawk shifted his weight, his boots touching down lightly on the surface of the massive metallic shell. Eitri watched him, wide-eyed. His voice resounded across the forge. You must be insane. Even Odin wouldn't dare dive directly into the core of a burning star. But I dare. Hawk looked at Eitri, let out a soft laugh, and then looked down at his feet. The next moment, without a moment's hesitation, he disappeared from the surface of the shell. Odin might be afraid of fire. But Hawk was not. For someone who wielded the fire of the phoenix, the heat of a dying star was nothing more than. Hiss. Okay, that's actually pretty hot. The moment Hawk appeared within the star, plunging into an ocean of burning liquid plasma, he couldn't help but suck in a sharp breath, gritting his teeth against the searing heat. But he hadn't forgotten why he was here. So. Burn. My Cosmo. Boom. 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 Deep inside the core of the blazing star, Hawk spread his arms wide. The spectral image of the phoenix appeared behind him as the blood-red flames surrounding the star gradually shifted, transforming into a dazzling, radiant gold. Soon, the fire burning within the core was no longer the natural plasma of a dying star. It had been completely replaced by Hawk's unique, terrifying energy, a river of golden fire laced with veins of ether red. Scree. A magnificent phoenix, surrounded by golden flames, erupted from the metallic forge with a cry echoing through space. Eitri, who had been watching with bated breath, saw the transformation and roared at the top of his lungs. Now. Clack. The protective shell retracted instantly. The eternal forge of Nidavellir roared back to life. But this time, the fire burning within the Dyson rings was not the fire of a star. It was the fire of the phoenix. The golden red plasma shot through the focusing lenses, blasting directly into the primary smelting vats of the Nidavellir forge. That's it. We have ignition. Move it. Move, move, move. Eitri shouted and ran to his workstation. He grabbed his huge forging hammer, so heavy that the famous 80-pound sledge looked like a toy in comparison. This one must have weighed at least 800 pounds. With a loud BAM, he brought it down on the big anvil. In an instant, sparks the size of cars flew into the air. A heat even more intense than the core of a star began to spread throughout the Nidavellir forge. Standing at the star's core, Hawk closed his eyes in pure focus, endlessly unleashing his cosmo energy. Simultaneously, he carefully directed all his understanding of life into this explosive energy, fueling the forge. Clang. Scree. Clang. Scree. Suddenly, in the middle of the roar of the flames, Hawk thought he could hear the rhythmic strike of Eitri's hammer. Initially, the sound was soft and distant, as if he were listening through thick, frosted glass to the forge outside. But over time, the sound of Eitri swinging his massive hammer became clearer and sharper. His perception improved, and the previous blurriness diminished. As the rhythmic strikes intensified and his senses heightened, Hawk unexpectedly experienced a strange, claustrophobic sensation. It felt as if he were trapped in a tiny, incredibly confined space, completely immobilized, unable to move a single muscle. But with every crisp strike of the hammer which resonated in his ears, the feeling of confinement lessened, slowly peeling away. Hawk had a surreal feeling. It felt like he was about to be born. No. It wasn't an illusion. It was real. At that moment, Eitri was drenched in sweat, his skin glowing red from the heat. He swung his massive hammer onto a breastplate on the anvil. As the detailed image of a phoenix preparing to take flight gradually appeared in the center of the breastplate, each hammer strike was accompanied by a louder, more distinct cry of a phoenix. At the same time, a vat of liquid gold, a perfect, seamlessly fused alloy of adamantium, URU metal, and raw life energy, melted by phoenix fire, was poured into large molds to create the various parts of the sacred armor. As each mold was cracked open, showing a perfectly formed piece. Eitri's hammering grew more frantic, and the phoenix's howls from the metal grew sharper and louder. The next second, Eitri brought the hammer down for the final strike. Boom. Chapter 278, 382, The Birth of the Phoenix Gold Cloth, Pseudo 8 cents, Thanos' debut. Clang. Eitri, the dwarf king, brought his massive forging hammer down for the final strike. In that singular instant, the intricate relief of the immortal bird etched into the center of the breastplate seemed to awaken, looking as if it were about to tear itself from the metal and take flight. It was breathtakingly lifelike. At that same moment, Hawk hovered inside the burning star's core and felt a powerful, deep resonance move through him as Eitri's hammer struck the anvil for the last time. It was a feeling he couldn't describe, like a deep harmony with the universe. Hawk opened his eyes the next second. VMMMM. As his eyes opened, the eyes of the phoenix etched onto the breastplate far below began to glow, whirling with gathered golden light. The golden light pulsed rapidly at first, but quickly found its rhythm, synchronizing perfectly with the beating of Hawk's heart. Hawk's heart beat. The sacred armor breathed. Eitri lifted the completed breastplate, the final, masterfully crafted piece bearing the phoenix relief, and slotted it into the empty space among the other 3,650 components that made up the full armor. Boom! A colossal pillar of crimson gold light sprang from the newly born phoenix gold cloth, piercing the roof of the forge and shooting straight into the cosmos. Within that blinding pillar of light, a magnificent, spectral phoenix, radiating endless golden fire, spread its wings wide. It let out a piercing cry that sounded through the stars. Then, the phantom bird folded its wings and dove, merging seamlessly into the assembled armor below. Eitri stared at the creation before him, his eyes illuminated with deep excitement. Another god-tier artifact had been born by his hands. Feeling the overwhelming presence emitted by the armor, Eitri was completely convinced of one thing: this masterpiece was immensely powerful, much more so than Odin's Gungnir. Hawk emerged from the stellar forge. He drifted down, his eyes locked on the magnificent creation hovering before him. His true, destined gold cloth. As the cosmic phenomena surrounding its birth slowly faded, the phoenix gold cloth hovered silently in the air. But it wasn't truly still. It was breathing. With every beat of Hawk's heart, a liquid, fire-like luster flowed across its golden surface. It was nothing like the crude, gold-plated bronze cloth he had hastily manifested with his Cosmo in the beginning, nor was it like the dark, menacing black phoenix surplice he used as a fallback. This true phoenix gold cloth lacked the bulky, utilitarian feel of his first creation. Instead, it exuded a deep divine aura, featuring a smooth, flowing design that harmoniously combined sacred elegance with wild intensity. In short, the phoenix cloth before him wasn't just an armor shaped like a phoenix. With just a thought, Hawk made the phoenix cloth break apart. In an instant, all 3,651 pieces flew toward him like a swarm of golden, fiery meteors. The pieces locked into place, fitting perfectly onto Hawk's body. As piece after piece covered him, the final components, the breastplate and the visor, crafted exclusively by Eitri's own hands, snapped down. Hawk and the phoenix cloth became one. He could sense it, a clear, joyful feeling of vitality emanating from the armor surrounding him. Simultaneously, the armor pulsed in time with Hawk's heartbeat, golden, fire-like energy flaring at every joint and seam. Hawk looked down and slowly clenched his fist. As his fingers closed, he felt it, overwhelming power rushing through him. It was enough to crush a star with his bare hands. This time, it wasn't just a sudden rush of imagined strength. It was simply the return of the power that was rightfully his. Once again. A saint is only truly complete, only truly at the apex of their power, when they don their cloth. Scree. A huge, ghostly golden phoenix burst from Hawk's body, soaring high above Nidavellir. As it spread its wings, the whole dwarven realm was covered by its golden shadow. The giant, glowing image of the golden phoenix was so bright and large that it could be seen even from the farthest parts of space. The phantom phoenix beat its wings, shedding golden, fire-like light. As the light drifted down toward Nidavellir, it transformed into a shower of golden sparks. To anyone standing on the ground looking up, it appeared as if the realm was being bathed in an eternal, golden meteor shower. And with the appearance of the golden phoenix came Hawk's voice. In the name of the phoenix, Nidavellir shall reside under my eternal protection. His voice sounded divine and allowed no challenge. Hawk was sending out his first official decree as a new god to the whole world tree cosmos and beyond, into the main universe. Yes. Ascended. He had comprehended the seventh sense, taking his first steps on the path to divinity. True godhood would only come with the eighth sense. But by combining what he learned about life from the celestial ego and God King Odin, Hawk had already touched the basics of the eighth sense. Now, wearing the phoenix gold cloth. The synergy between a saint and their cloth isn't a simple addition. It's multiplication. So, upon donning the phoenix cloth, Hawk had effectively ascended. He might be a temporary god, but dimensional gods remain true gods. A temporary god still holds divine status, and more importantly, he was a chief god. Hawk's declaration spread out from Nidavellir in all directions at the speed of light, followed by the sharp, metallic cry of the phoenix. Scree. But this declaration wasn't meant for everyone. Hawk's proclamation of protection over Nidavellir wasn't broadcast on a frequency that ordinary mortal lifeforms could hear. It was targeted. Aimed directly at the countless dimensional lords, planetary celestials, and pantheon heads scattered across the universe. When his declaration, carried on the cry of the phoenix, spread across a populated planet at the speed of light, the ordinary citizens went about their day, completely oblivious. But the celestial residing within that planet paled instantly. Upon hearing the phoenix's cry, a horrifying montage involuntarily forced its way into their mind. Battle. Genocide. Battle. Extinction. Every dimensional lord, planetary celestial, and pantheon head who received the broadcast shared the exact same reaction: dead serious, grim silence. Because the montage wasn't a bluff, it was the bloody history of this newly declared chief god, Phoenix. It was the path he had carved to reach his throne. Hawk's broadcast wasn't a peaceful introduction. It was a threat. In a word, Nidavellir is mine. Hands off. Touch it, and your entire race dies. This phoenix. Where did he come from? A god of the Shi'ar Empire. Aren't the Shi'ar gods Shara and Kithri? Then who the hell is this phoenix? A new ascension. He's a chief god, not just a celestial. He moves fast. The world tree hasn't even fully collapsed into our universe yet, and he's already staked a claim on Nidavellir. Whatever. Doesn't matter. I'm light years away from Nidavellir anyway. Same here. Show's over, folks. Move along. He's a chief god. I'm just a dimensional lord. God might be in my title, but to a chief god, I'm just a bug. Hey, Dormammu, weren't you just saying? As Hawk's warning rippled throughout the universe, the telepathic chatter among the cosmic deities slowly died down. After all, Nidavellir was part of the world tree, and the world tree hadn't fully merged into the primary universe yet. Furthermore, the solar system sector was notoriously desolate. Very few deities lived nearby, and even fewer had any interest in the area. So, they simply made a mental note to cross Nidavellir off their lists, acknowledging that it was now under the protection of a chief god named Phoenix, a god whose debut was defined by war and annihilation. As long as they stayed away, everything would be fine. At the same time, a massive dreadnought, having just reduced Xander to ash, was tearing through space at maximum warp, heading straight for Nidavellir. Upon receiving Hawk's declaration, the gargantuan ship performed an impossible maneuver, going from faster-than-light travel to a complete stop instantly, defying all known laws of physics. It was like a speeding car suddenly slamming on the brakes after realizing it was about to drive straight off a cliff. The interior of the massive dreadnought abandoned conventional, scientific layouts. Instead, it was designed to resemble a miniaturized cosmos contained within the ship's hull. And amidst this simulated field of stars sat a single, imposing throne. Upon the throne sat a massive, purple-skinned warlord. Thanos. The Mad Titan. A descendant of the Eternals. Yes, Thanos was technically an Eternal. Surprising, isn't it? But unlike the Eternals currently hiding out on Earth, Thanos, while sharing their lineage, was a mutant. His signature purple skin, his ridged, formidable chin, and his abnormally massive, imposing physique were all undeniable proof of his mutation. Rumor had it that this mutation stemmed from the deviant gene. The deviants were sworn, eternal enemies of the Eternals, known for their distinctive purple skin. As everyone is aware, the deviants were also formed by the Celestials. They had a uniquely dangerous and powerful trait that was highly disruptive. The more they killed, the stronger they got. So, as a mutated Eternal with the deviant gene, Thanos inherited this frightening power. After destroying his home world, Titan, his strength grew to match that of a lesser Celestial. And as time went on, his strength only continued to grow. Finally, with his power at its peak, Thanos was no longer satisfied with purging planets one by one. He had devised a permanent solution. A plan that, once executed, would allow him to finally retire, watch the sunrise on a grateful universe, and live out his days in peace. And so, just moments ago, Thanos had decimated Xander, successfully acquiring the first Infinity Stone. The Power Stone. With the Power Stone in his grasp, Thanos set his sights on Nidavellir, the forge of the World Tree. He intended to compel the dwarven blacksmiths to create an Infinity Gauntlet. By doing so, he could harness the power of all 6 stones, snap his fingers, and randomly eliminate half of all life in the universe to restore balance. Don't wonder how he discovered the gauntlet. The Eternals of Titan are known for their very long lifespans. These lengthy lives meant that stories like Odin's effort to collect the Infinity Stones and create a gauntlet became part of their tradition. So, having just raised Xander and secured the Power Stone, Thanos ordered his dreadnought to set a direct course for the solar system. But just now, the very second his dreadnought crossed the threshold into the solar system sector, Hawk's declaration slammed into his mind. In the name of the Phoenix, Nidavellir shall reside under my eternal protection. Chapter 279, 383, The Mad Titan's Crusade. Thanos' flagship was named the Sanctuary II. It was huge. Even by cosmic standards, it was a floating war fortress the size of a planet. But right now, the interior of the dreadnought was dead silent. The moment Hawk's declaration spread throughout the universe, the Sanctuary II stopped suddenly, its huge engines shutting down right away. It wasn't out of fear. It was instinct. The natural, instinctive respect needed when near a chief god. The Black Order, the fearsome generals who commanded Thanos' armies, including Cull Obsidian and Supergiant, stood in silence. They looked up at their leader, who sat upon a throne that seemed to float amidst a simulated galaxy. Thanos. The Mad Titan sat still on his throne. Over 8 feet tall, his dark purple skin was coarse and heavily textured, resembling cracked granite. Faint, golden striations ran across his neck and massive arms, resembling natural, organic armor. His skull was ridged, protruding backward, and his massive chin was deeply grooved, like a vertical comb. Right now, a rapid succession of images was flashing through his mind. When the cry of the phoenix had resounded through the void, Thanos, like the countless dimensional lords, planetary celestials, and pantheon heads, hadn't just heard Hawk's declaration. He had seen the bloody resume of the phoenix. Thanos watched the highlight reel. He saw Hawk break a pure vibranium energy shield with one strike and destroy Wakanda completely. He saw the confrontation over the Atlantic Ocean, the tense standoff with Poseidon. But most importantly, Thanos observed Hawk with a completely indifferent expression as he methodically annihilated the heaven dimension. He saw Hawk effectively salt the earth, exterminating every angel. The message was clear. Thanos understood the serious, hidden threat in Hawk's declaration. Nidavellir is off-limits for a hostile takeover. As his brain raced, Thanos quickly scrapped his original operational plan. He had initially intended to arrive at Nidavellir, force the dwarves to forge his Infinity Gauntlet, and then bathe the realm in blood, culling half their population. Thanos held a vision. He wanted the universe to survive. But by his calculations, if the population stayed the same, soon all resources would run out. The universe would starve. After all, the bigger the universe's population, the more seeds the Celestials planted. Each time a new Celestial was born, a planet with life was destroyed. How could this be allowed to continue? The universe didn't belong exclusively to the Celestials. It belonged to everyone. As the saying goes, protecting the universe is everyone's responsibility. What gave the Celestials the right to mine the universe? Just because eternity, the personification of time, made them and told them to keep balance? Yes. Eternity may have told them to keep balance, but never gave the Celestials permission to create more of themselves on their own. The law is strict, but grace is infinite. The same applies to time and eternity. To refrain from directly interfering with time, eternity created the Celestials. Their job was to act like mechanics, keeping time's machinery running. As for eternity himself, after making the Celestials, he disappeared completely. Some say eternity retired to stay neutral. Others say eternity just disappeared without a trace. But that wasn't the point. The important fact is that eternity only made 3 original Celestials. Erishem the Judge, Exitar the Exterminator, and Essen the Searcher. 1 to search, 1 to judge, 1 to execute. And yet, at some point, a 4th Celestial was born. Then a 5th, and more after that. They weren't made by eternity. And each time one was born, a planet with life was destroyed. If the Celestials kept reproducing like this, would there eventually be any life left in the universe besides them? Hence, this was wrong. It's important to note Titan's history. The ancestors of the Eternals on Titan were originally rebels. Simply put, eons ago, one of the Eternals on Earth was bitten by a deviant. He didn't die. Instead, he mutated. But it was a blessing in disguise. The mutation broke the mental conditioning imposed by the Celestials, restoring his erased memories. He realized they were just tools. He and his followers defected, fled Earth, and eventually put down roots on Titan. So, as a mutated descendant of the Eternals, Thanos regularly found himself ostracized for speaking out against his people's passive, unresisting complacency. He would look up at the brilliant, starry sky, his fists clenched tight, and silently swear a vow. Thanos knew he couldn't fight the Celestials head-on. No one could. But Thanos knew he could delay the inevitable death of the universe. By culling the population of every life-bearing planet, he could ensure their numbers remained below the threshold required to trigger a celestial emergence. This way, life could continue, and the universe would endure. A win-win. As for the Celestials, he'd deal with them later. In summary, Thanos' original plan was to go to Nidavellir, get the Infinity Gauntlet, and then do his duty by wiping out half the dwarves. He was already there, after all. Might as well kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But that plan depended on 2 things, that Nidavellir was a populated planet in the primary universe, and that it no longer had a chief god protecting it. Once again, Thanos knew not to anger the Celestials. He also knew not to anger a chief god. Especially a decisive, ruthless chief god who clearly didn't care for diplomacy or long-winded origin stories. Odin, the previous chief god who protected Nidavellir, had fit that description. However, back then, the World Tree cosmos was separate from the primary universe. So, in Thanos' original grand design, the realms of the World Tree weren't on his culling list. But when Odin died, and the World Tree started merging with the primary universe, everything changed. First, did Nidavellir still have a chief god protecting them? Obviously not. Thor might be a god, but he wasn't a chief god yet. Second, was Nidavellir now a populated planet within the primary universe? Yes. The moment the world tree merged with the main timeline, it became one. So, it was naturally added to Thanos' list. But now, that plan was completely ruined. After their protector, Odin, died, Nidavellir promptly secured the support of a new chief god. Phoenix. And this new chief god, Phoenix, was just like Odin in his prime, ruthless, decisive, and preferring to maintain his rule with an iron fist. But that wasn't the main issue. The main issue was that Thanos' culling list explicitly excluded any populated planet under the direct protection of a chief god. Even if that planet was overflowing with life and prosperity. The reason was simple. A planet protected by a chief god, no matter how overpopulated it became, would never have to worry about a celestial seed tearing it apart from the inside out. The Celestials might plant their seeds on ordinary planets, on planets within dimensional pockets, or even on planets watched over by lesser gods. But they would never plant a seed on a planet under the direct jurisdiction of a chief god. Therefore, sitting on his throne, Thanos tapped his thick, purple fingers rhythmically against the armrest. Tap. 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 The crisp sound resounded through the silent chamber. Standing at the foot of the throne, the Black Order waited for his command, Ebony Maw, tall and thin, with grayish-black skin, hollow eyes, and flowing black robes. Cull Obsidian, built like a boulder, his skin deep gray. Proxima Midnight, with her dark blue skin, is dressed in a sleek black combat suit. Beside her is her husband, Corvus Glaive, whose skin is mottled gray-black. The four of them looked up in unison, their eyes fixed on the formidable figure seated above them. Their king. The course remains unchanged. But Nidavellir has welcomed a new chief god, Phoenix. Therefore, Nidavellir is granted an exemption from our culling. Thanos' primary objective for visiting Nidavellir was the Infinity Gauntlet. The culling was a secondary objective. Since Nidavellir had secured a new chief god, they had earned the right to survive. As for other populated planets, if you want to survive, go find your own chief god to protect you. If every populated planet had a chief god, I could retire early. Unfortunately, the universe is boundless, chief gods are rare, and populated planets are numerous. But, Thanos was truly glad that Nidavellir would be spared from his culling. He wasn't pretending, he really meant it. He had never destroyed for the sake of destruction. He had chosen the path of destruction solely for the sake of survival. Tragically, very few people understood his burden, especially his adopted daughter, Gamora. As the Sanctuary 2 restarted its engines and moved forward, Thanos sat on his throne, thinking of his estranged daughter. He let out a quiet sigh. In truth, Thanos wasn't the first to hear Hawk's declaration. Hawk had broadcast his ascension from Nidavellir, radiating outward in all directions. Therefore, the primary universe hadn't received the message first. The first to receive it were the other realms within the world tree cosmos. In Jotunheim, the icy realm that had long endured Odin's sanctions, the frost giants, depleted of their leader in the casket of ancient winters, emerged from the ruins. They erupted in joyful cheers upon sensing Odin's death, celebrating the fall of the tyrant. When Hawk's declaration reached them, they ignored it, too busy celebrating Odin's fall. Svartalfheim, the realm of the dark elves. Muspelheim, the realm of the fire demons. Both realms had endured prolonged, harsh economic blockades and military suppression during Odin's reign. The remaining dark elves and fire demons likewise dismissed Hawk's warning, continuing their festivities and celebrating Odin's downfall. As for Helheim, the realm of the dead, it was completely silent. Don't ask why the realm of the dead was still empty of souls even after Hela was freed from prison. Hela had forced every soul in Helheim to join her undead army. And the exact moment Hawk's voice reached Asgard, Hela currently held Thor by the throat, brutally forcing him against the balcony railing of the royal palace. In the next moment, Hawk's voice and the piercing cry of the phoenix resounded across Asgard's skies, ringing clearly in Hela's ears and in Thor's, whose last eye flashed with fierce lightning. Chapter 280, 384, Hulk Again. The Golden Palace of Asgard. Hela, the goddess of death, stood on the palace balcony wearing a headdress resembling the jagged, massive antlers of an obsidian stag. She had her half-brother, Thor, pressed mercilessly against the stone railing. Thor lay gasping, his right eye freshly taken by his sister's blade. Lightning started to spark in the empty socket. For a moment, it felt like he was back on that cliff in Norway, looking at his father. And right at that moment, Hawk's voice, carried on the piercing cry of the phoenix, echoed across the war-torn skies of Asgard. In the name of the phoenix, Nidavellir shall reside under my eternal protection. Hela, her hand still wrapped around Thor's throat, snapped her head up. She looked toward the sector of space where Nidavellir was located. Nidavellir. Phoenix. Well, isn't that precious? A cold, cruel smile formed on Hela's pale face, which was characterized by hollow cheeks and eyes as gray and cloudy as pearls. She had been gone for a very long time. Long enough that Odin had systematically and completely erased her from Asgardian history. As a result, her glorious return and rightful assumption of the throne hadn't exactly gone smoothly. In simple terms, she had 0 approval rating. But that didn't matter. Hela's platform was built on blood and fear. If they refused to bend the knee and accept her rule, fine. She would just kill them all. That was her approach to the rebellion currently raging across Asgard. If her people were so eager to die in battle and secure their place in Valhalla, she was more than happy to oblige. So, upon her return, Hela had unleashed a torrential bloodbath. Asgard's military forces had been systematically slaughtered. As for the civilians, thanks to Heimdall, a large portion of the populace had managed to flee into the hidden mountain stronghold. But many hadn't made it. Countless Asgardians had died in the chaos. But since they had died fighting, they at least had a chance to enter Valhalla. If that was how Hela treated Asgard, her treatment of the other realms was even worse. Especially Vanaheim. Vanaheim was Queen Frigga's homeland. But crucially, it was also Hela's mother's homeland. The Aesir and the Vanir had a long history of intermarriage. But when Hela came back, she showed no mercy to her mother's people. She went into Odin's vault and used the eternal flame to bring back the army of the dead that Odin had buried with her. Her first act as queen was to send that undead army to attack Vanaheim. It was a total massacre. Scorched earth. No survivors. Don't ask why Hela was so ruthless. Because in her eyes, they deserved it. As her mother's people, when Odin had imprisoned her, they hadn't lifted a finger to help. Instead, they had just rolled over and sent Odin a shiny new wife. Fine. If the Vanir preferred to hide in their shells like cowards, Hela's solution was straightforward. Crush the shells. And so, Hela had ordered her undead army to raze Vanaheim to the ground. Her original plan had been to flatten Vanaheim and then send her undead legions to the other realms to announce the end of Odin's era and the dawn of Hela's reign. But the rebellion on Asgard had escalated faster than she anticipated. So, she decided to crush the uprising at home before dealing with the rest of the cosmos. After all, the other realms, the frost giants, the fire demons, the dark elves, had been thoroughly beaten down by her and Odin eons ago, and had been kept under strict Asgardian blockade ever since. As for Nidavellir, they were just a bunch of blacksmiths. In Hela's eyes, they weren't a threat. That was why, while Asgard burned and Vanaheim bled, the other realms and Nidavellir had managed to stay out of the crossfire. But now, Nidavellir had just pulled off a huge stunt. Odin was dead, yes. But she, the rightful queen, was here. And yet, instead of groveling and offering a new covenant of servitude to her, the dwarves had bypassed her entirely and signed a sacred protection pact with an outsider. What was that called? Treason. Betrayal. So, Hela was furious. So furious she wanted to fly to Nidavellir right now, slaughter every last dwarf, and use their blood to send a chilling, undeniable message to the rest of the 9 realms. I, Hela, goddess of death, have returned. Putting fantasies aside, she still needed to confront the problem directly in front of her. Originally, Hela hadn't planned on killing Thor outright. Because Asgardians who die in battle go to Valhalla. And Valhalla was a paradise. Lush mountains, clear waters, and endless peace and celebration. It was the heaven of the world tree. Hela had no intention of letting Thor go to Valhalla. She intended to incapacitate him completely, discard him, wait until the battle concluded, then kill him calmly. By denying him a warrior's death, his soul would be barred from Valhalla, having only one fate. Her domain. Helheim. But that plan was out the window. She needed to finish Thor off now, as quickly as possible, so she could head to Nidavellir and deliver a swift, brutal counterattack against this foreign god, Phoenix. Therefore, Hela looked down at her half-brother, a cruel, icy smirk twisting her lips. Goodbye, my dear bro. Crackle. Before Hela could finish her sentence, Thor, who hadn't heard Hawk's voice, but the voice of his father, Odin, suddenly opened his remaining eye. In the next moment, a massive, blinding lightning bolt streaked from the sky. Sparks erupted from Thor's vacant eye socket and his hands, causing the Golden Palace to shake with a thunderous roar. The balcony where Thor and Hela struggled was instantly engulfed in a localized thunderstorm of unimaginable power. Caught in the blast of concentrated lightning, Hela was violently thrown from the balcony of the Golden Palace, soaring into the sky. Thor descended from the sky, his body wreathed in crackling electricity, his missing eye blazing with blue lightning. He landed on the Rainbow Bridge, stepping into his true power as the God of Thunder. Finally. God tier. Not bad. Hovering invisibly high above, hidden by the Reality Stone, Hawk watched Thor unleash his power. Under his golden visor, Hawk smiled with real pride at his friend's breakthrough. It wasn't fake, it was sincere. Even though Hawk was playing the long game, waiting to play the opportunistic Oriole while the mantis stalked the cicada. But as Hawk had told himself before, business is business, and personal is personal. Most importantly, the gears of Ragnarok were already turning. Nothing could stop them now. Not even Hawk. True. If he intervened right now, he could definitely delay the onset of Ragnarok, but he couldn't actually kill Hela. Because Hela drew her power directly from Asgard. As long as Hela stood on Asgardian soil, her power would continue to grow exponentially. It was obvious. When she first appeared, her clothes were in tatters, and she looked like a washed-up goth chick. But the moment she set foot on Asgard, her attire repaired itself, her pallor vanished, and her power surged. So, as long as Asgard existed, Hela was virtually invincible. And the most critical point, intervening now offers Hawk zero benefit and massive risk. If he got lucky, he helped a friend. But if he got unlucky... Remember, every time he takes a step, he risks revealing himself to time. What if time exploits his act of compassion as a chance to lure him into a temporal snare? Hawk was willing to help a friend. But if the price of that help was his own existence? Sorry. It wasn't about being a coward. It was the understanding that your intervention wouldn't alter the final result and might even ruin you in the process. That's not loyalty. That's just stupidity. Hawk remained quietly suspended above Asgard, watching Thor unleash his godly might against the army of the dead on the Rainbow Bridge. And, he watched the Hulk, currently brawling with the giant wolf Fenris in the waters below Asgard. Yes. The Hulk. You heard that right. The very same Hulk that Hawk vividly remembered drowning once, and then literally beating to death a second time. The Hulk was back. However, when Hawk saw the green behemoth wrestling with the giant wolf, he wasn't particularly surprised. Because this Hulk wasn't the one he had killed. Even time itself couldn't resurrect the Hulk Hawk had killed. Hawk had killed him not just once, but twice. Within Hawk's personal timeline, the death of the Hulk marked a highly significant event. Essentially, it was a definitive, unchangeable moment in Hawk's past. Because Hawk had sealed his timeline and made his past unalterable, even the primary universe's time was unable to revive that specific Hulk. Therefore, there was only one explanation. The Hulk down there brawling with the wolf was a variant. An accidental tourist from another multiverse, brought in to fill the narrative void left by the absence of the primary universe's Hulk. Hawk could already sense the faint, lingering traces of dimensional displacement radiating from this variant Hulk. But Hawk had no interest in this new Hulk, nor did he have any desire to kill him. His grudge with the Hulk was settled. The first kill had wiped the slate clean. As for the second kill, that was just Bruce Banner willingly committing suicide by proxy for the sake of a misguided love. Hawk had merely obliged him. So, Hawk gave the variant Hulk fighting Fenris one brief glance, then shifted his attention back to Hela, who had reappeared on the Rainbow Bridge, preparing for a final showdown with Thor. No, wait. Where was Loki? Hawk raised an eyebrow. In the next moment, his eyes cut through the chaos of the battlefield. He swiftly identified Loki, who, amid Thor's frantic commands during the chaos, was dashing toward Odin's vault. Hawk's lips curved into a predatory smile. Finally. It's showtime. Chapter 281, 385, The Power Lost and Found. Cloaked by the Reality Stone, Hawk expanded his seventh sense, casting an invisible net over the entirety of Asgard. Unseen and unheard, he followed close behind Loki as the god of mischief sprinted frantically into Odin's vault. The right-handed infinity gauntlet. It sat proudly on a pedestal, embedded with 6 brightly colored stones. But the stones were counterfeit. That's why Hela, upon noticing, casually tipped it over and called it fake. The gauntlet itself was real, crafted in Nidavellir, but the stones were cheap imitations. And obvious ones at that. The explanation was simple. Because the genuine space stone, the Tesseract, was sitting quietly on a display stand just a few feet away. Hawk's seventh sense swept over the glowing blue cube. A thought flickered in his mind. An instant later, he quickly dismissed the idea. The space stone was useless to him. It could bend space, yes, but it couldn't bend time, and it certainly couldn't breach the barriers between multiverses. So, it was redundant. Hawk let the thought go and refocused his attention on Loki, who had just snatched the massive, horned crown of the fire demon Surtur and was carrying it toward the eternal flame. Loki, clad in his distinctive long green and black leathers, drew a deep breath. He gazed at the skull while holding it over the blazing, eternal fire, his lips moving rapidly in a tense, almost frantic manner. With the eternal flame, you are reborn. Whoosh. As soon as the crown made contact with the eternal flame, the fire erupted violently, unleashing a surge of ancient heat. The entire vault began to shudder violently. Loki didn't stick around to watch. He turned and ran for his life. But as he sprinted past the display stands, he grabbed the Tesseract on the fly, tucking the space stone under his arm before scrambling out of the vault. The very instant he crossed the threshold, Surtur, bathed in the eternal flame, was resurrected. Boom. The eternal flame ignited within the deep, empty eye sockets of the skull first. Two roaring infernos burst to life in the darkness, and Surtur, reborn from the ashes, opened his eyes. The fire spread like molten lava, racing across every crack and crevice of the skull. Wherever it touched, the pale bone was consumed by a blinding, searing light. The flames surged downward, forming an invisible, burning spine. Vertebra by vertebra, the fire built a towering, molten backbone. The ground began to fracture. No matter where you were in Asgard, you could feel the violent tremors shaking the realm. Hela felt it too. She whipped her head around, her eyes locking onto the Golden Palace. What she saw was destruction. The Golden Palace was burning, layers of fire consuming the ancient structure. The palace was cracking, shattering from the inside out amidst the spreading inferno. The next moment, a colossal fire demon, its physical form completely reconstructed by the eternal flame, burst through the roof of the Golden Palace, wielding a massive, blazing sword. Standing miles high, a towering titan of fire and ash, Surtur's voice boomed across the entirety of Asgard. Tremble before me, Asgard. I am your doom. I am your reckoning. With every word, with every swing of his massive twilight sword, Surtur destroyed the buildings and the earth of Asgard. Structures collapsed, massive blocks of stone raining down like hail. The ground ripped apart, releasing the eternal flames fire that raced across the land like a wave of liquid fire, seemingly determined to burn the whole realm. Hela stared at the titan destroying her kingdom and let out a furious, blood-curdling roar. Taking advantage of the distraction, Thor and Valkyrie managed to slip out of Hela's attack range. But the cost was unimaginable, the destruction of their home. Odin had told Thor that Asgard was not a place, but a people. Where the people of Asgard stand, that is Asgard. But knowing that intellectually didn't lessen the great agony Thor felt as he watched his home burn. But then, he saw the Hulk leap into the air, attempt to punch Surtur in the face, and get swatted back down like a fly. Thor snapped out of his sorrow. After some frantic yelling, the Hulk grabbed Thor and Valkyrie, and with a massive leap, landed safely on the refugee ship packed with the surviving Asgardians. Hela watched the ship pull away, then turned her fury back to Surtur, who was standing on her land, destroying her kingdom with impunity. She chose to deal with the fire demon first. The reason was straightforward, her power stemmed directly from Asgard's soil. If Asgard was destroyed, she would fall too. So. Die. Hela tilted her head back, glaring up at the massive giant. She conjured massive, deadly obsidian spikes, necroswords, and hurled them relentlessly at Surtur. But against Surtur, a being whose sole, destined purpose was to annihilate Asgard, such attacks were nothing more than a minor annoyance. Actually, saying they were a minor annoyance implied they even reached him. Before Hela's necroswords could even touch his molten body, they were instantly incinerated into fine ash by the raging aura of the eternal flame surrounding him. It's a universal truth. There's always a bigger fish. Hela beat Thor like a mother disciplining a child. And now, Surtur was beating Hela like a father disciplining his daughter. Yeah. The circle of life. Hovering invisibly, Hawk watched the entire scene unfold. He observed Hela, clearly overwhelmed, her power visibly waning as Surtur methodically destroyed the source of her strength, Asgard itself. Hawk mentally noted the mechanics of her power loss. And then. Hawk glanced at the refugee ship, which was now safely out of range, and prepared to make his move. The destruction of Asgard was imminent. It was time for him to enter the stage. Soon, as Surtur tore Asgard apart, the world tree cosmos, which was sustaining severe damage, began to bleed heavily into the primary universe's temporal flow. Because of this, the refugee ship carrying Thor and the others was now technically sailing through the spacetime of the primary universe. Standing near the viewport, Thor looked back at the rapidly shrinking, burning ruin of Asgard. Just then, a booming roar carried across the void. Surtur gripped his massive twilight sword with both hands, raised it high above his head, and drove it straight down, plunging it deep into the heart of Asgard. In an instant. Boom. A ring of blinding white light burst from the point of impact, spreading outward in a perfect circle at terrifying speed. Wherever the light touched, everything was reduced to nothingness. The grand palaces, the majestic mountains, everything that made up Asgard was instantly erased, as if wiped from the canvas of reality by a cosmic eraser. The moment the blinding white light completely engulfed the realm, Asgard vanished. And with it, Surtur vanished as well. After all, he was standing on Asgard's soil. When Asgard vanished, Surtur disappeared as well. It happened in that exact fraction of a second, Thor and Heimdall aboard the ship, watching a blinding flash erase their home. In that very moment, as the temporal current of the primary universe opened its jaws to swallow what remained of the world tree, Hawk, who had been waiting for this precise moment, sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, snapped them open without a shred of delay. Boom. 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 The compressed power of his cosmo, which Hawk had been restraining and suppressing to its maximum, suddenly detonated. he unleashed it in just a fraction of a millisecond. In a flash, the white light of Asgard's destruction, having reached its zenith, was instantly eclipsed by a burst of the most dazzling light. Whoosh! Vanaheim, Jotunheim, Alfheim and Nidavellir. And most importantly, the void where Asgard had just been, and the collapsing structure of the world tree itself, all of it vanished in an instant. Disappeared without a trace, leaving nothing behind. Heimdall, standing next to Thor, ready to offer words of comfort, stared at the empty space where the world tree had been just a second ago. His golden eyes widened to their limits. This. Heimdall was in complete disbelief. He squeezed his eyes shut, then snapped them open again, turning to look at Thor in shock. I can't feel Asgard anymore. I can't even feel the world tree. And it wasn't just Heimdall. Thor, having lost an eye but finally grasping the true core of his power, having officially stepped into the realm of a true god, stared at the empty void where the 9 realms used to be. He was just as stunned. In fact, his shock ran even deeper than Heimdall's. Because Thor looked down. He raised his hands, clenching them into tight fists, testing his strength. He was still strong. But I can't feel my divine power. What? Heimdall looked at Thor, his confusion deepening into alarm. What do you mean you can't feel your divine power? Thor looked up, meeting Heimdall's gaze. My power is gone. Yes. He was still technically a god. He could still survive the vacuum of space. But his divine power, the elemental force he commanded, was no longer present. Or rather, his divine authority. At this moment, Thor could no longer feel his connection to the lightning. It was like a passionate romance that had ended in a brutal, unexpected breakup the very next day. Heimdall drew in a sharp breath. His mind raced. Is it because Asgard was destroyed? No, my power is tied to the world. Thor shook his head, ready to clarify that his power was connected to the world tree itself, so even if the primary universe consumed the world tree, his power should still have persisted. But just as he was about to speak, suddenly, a familiar trace of electricity crackled between Thor's fingers, sparkling over his palm. Clearly, his divine power had returned. Heimdall watched the lightning spark to life. A thought seemed to cross his mind. His dark face broke into a strained, accommodating smile as he looked at a thoroughly confused Thor. Ha! Very funny, Thor. Heimdall assumed Thor had been making a dark joke to cut the tension and relieve the stress of losing their home. He was just glad Thor still had a sense of humor. Thor opened his mouth to explain that he wasn't joking, but seeing the look of forced relief on Heimdall's face, he knew it was pointless. So, Thor was left completely bewildered, having no idea why his power had vanished 1 second, only to return the next. Chapter 282, 386, The Price of the World Tree. If there was anything in the universe more confused than Thor at this exact moment, it was time itself. If time had a normal mind, it would be completely overwhelmed, struggling to process the impossible error it had just faced. But, of course, it didn't. Still, the force of time lingered in total confusion, staring at the spot where the world tree had disappeared from its timeline. What just happened? Time was stumped. Just a moment ago, it had opened its huge cosmic jaws, ready to swallow the world tree whole. The prize was already falling right in. And the result? Just as it clamped its jaws shut to begin digesting the cosmos, it bit down on nothing but empty space, nearly fracturing its own metaphysical teeth. Time opened its maw again. Inside. Empty. Where is the world tree? When time finally processed what had happened, its confusion shifted instantly to fury. In the next microsecond, it initiated a localized temporal rollback, rewinding the event to the exact moment the world tree had begun its final collapse. The image froze on that specific fraction of a second. There, time observed it. The intense white light from Asgard's destruction was entirely eclipsed by a dazzling, powerful wave of golden light. Amidst that endless golden sea, time noticed it. Perched on the cracking canopy of the world tree, a splendid phoenix unfurled its wings and emitted a sharp cry. At the center of the spectral phoenix, Hawk sat cross-legged, his eyes glowing with the same golden fire. As if sensing the gaze of time itself, Hawk, sitting atop the world tree, shifted his glowing golden pupils. He looked directly at time. Time was stunned, then suddenly erupted in anger. At that moment, sitting atop the canopy of the world tree, Hawk experienced a sudden, intense pulse from his sixth sense. He gradually closed his eyes. It was exactly as he had predicted, time had found him. But even before he arrived here, Hawk had mentally prepared himself to be found and to face the inevitable consequences of his actions. After all, what was the worst time could do? Banish Gwen to an Earth in some random, parallel multiverse. And then what? Did time have the power to actually erase Gwen from existence? No. Time didn't have the guts, and more importantly, it didn't have the authority. Not as long as Hawk was still alive. Because Gwen was his wife. The moment they had spoken their vows, Gwen's timeline had become inextricably linked to his. She had ceased to exist solely within the primary universe's timeline and had become a fixed point within Hawk's own temporal flow. Time simply couldn't erase her. Not only was it unable to delete Gwen, but even after banishing her to a distant multiverse, it couldn't harm her. In fact, it had to make sure she remained alive. As long as Hawk was breathing, Time was obligated to keep Gwen safe and sound. Honestly, Hawk almost wished Time would grow a pair, banish Gwen to a parallel Earth, and then try to kill her. Because if it did, he could just resurrect her within his own timeline. And then, the moment Gwen was resurrected, the resulting temporal paradox would cause Time itself to collapse. So, the real question was, did Time still have the nerve to banish Gwen? The answer was yes. It was the only way Time could instinctively vent its anger. Although the retaliation was ultimately powerless and frustrating for a cosmic force, it was preferable to doing nothing. Any act of defiance against Time must be met with punishment. Atop the world tree, Hawk sat with legs crossed, his eyes closed, his expression perfectly calm. But behind that calm exterior, a fierce, terrible anger was growing within him. He had thought he was ready. He had thought he had prepared himself to bear the cost of his actions, whatever they might be. Just like always. Hawk was a man who never apologized for his choices and never regretted the things he had to do. He had assumed this time would be no different. Because Gwen had been ready, and Hawk had thought he was ready too. But he was wrong. When the moment actually arrived, when the consequence became a reality, he realized he hadn't been ready at all. I am your wife. For better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow, I will love you without reservation, cherish you, and be faithful to you, until death finally parts us. I am Gwen Phoenix. I am your wife. The memory of their farewell lingered in his thoughts, Gwen's tight embrace, her lips near his ear, whispering the vows they exchanged on their wedding day. A temporary separation is just the price we pay for an eternity together. So, I will be waiting for you to come and bring me home, my husband. I will. Boom. A tall column of golden phoenix fire burst around Hawk as he sat on the world tree. He opened his eyes suddenly, his mind calm and still. His face remained emotionless as he slowly rose, gazing down at the vast cosmic structure below. The devastating wound Surtur inflicted on the world tree with his twilight sword was now bleeding a flow of molten phoenix fire, sealing the breach. This was the fire of life. Hawk struck precisely at the perfect microsecond, performing an impeccable maneuver. In that brief instant as the world tree was collapsing, he had outpaced time, intervened, and completely consumed the world tree. He had played the perfect Oriole, turning all of Time's meticulous planning and manipulation into nothing more than a stepping stone for his own ascension. However, this wasn't the end. It was merely the beginning. Even though Hawk had swallowed the world tree, the cosmos itself was still critically unstable. Hawk had only managed to catch the world tree as it snapped. He was holding the pieces together, but he hadn't repaired the damage. The loss of Midgard, the annihilation of Asgard, and the erasure of Helheim, the loss of these three realms had caused a massive hemorrhage of the world tree's foundational essence. Compounded by the prolonged assault from the primary universe's timeline, the world tree was currently on life support, barely clinging to existence. As for why Helheim had vanished along with Asgard. Helheim was situated directly beneath Asgard. Surtur's final cataclysmic blow not only destroyed Asgard but also shattered Helheim with the resulting shockwave. Therefore, to revive the world tree, I must fully restore its fundamental essential essence. Otherwise, this whole thing was just a waste of time. A mirage. Hawk emerged from the blinding golden light as the phoenix gold cloth quickly disassembled from his body and reformed at the top of the world tree into a majestic, soaring phoenix. It emitted endless golden radiance, serving as a new, artificial sun that illuminated the 5 remaining realms of the dying cosmos. This is going to be annoying. Hawk, now only in his slacks with his hair flowing in the cosmic wind, looked up at the hovering phoenix cloth. He shook his head and sighed deeply, murmuring to himself. Whatever. I'll start with the easy part. Let's get the underworld sorted out first. With that, Hawk took a single step and materialized at the exact nexus point where Helheim had formerly connected to the world tree. The projection of the Phoenix universe instantly exploded to life behind him. Hawk looked at the projection. Within his Phoenix universe, his personal underworld, created as a simple, flat plane with a domed sky. With a thought, similar to dragging and dropping a file onto a desktop, Hawk effortlessly pulled his underworld from his cosmos and placed it into the void left by Helheim. Rumble. As the enormous weight of his underworld settled into the void, a deafening, catastrophic roar resonated across the cosmos. The world tree and the newly implanted underworld itself trembled fiercely. The next moment. Puffed. Hawk's face suddenly flushed a deep, unhealthy red. His mouth opened involuntarily, and he vomited a massive mouthful of golden blood. Damn it. Submit to me, or you'll die. I'm trying to save your life, you stubborn piece of wood. Wiping the golden blood from his chin, Hawk's face briefly went pale as he knelt on the ashen ground of his recently implanted underworld. He quickly regained composure, glaring up at the world tree. The world tree shuddered again in response. It was almost as if it were screaming back. Piss off. I'd rather die than submit to you. As the world tree violently rejected the transplant, Hawk, attempting to force the connection between his underworld and the world tree, felt the backlash once more. His face reddened, and he spat out another mouthful of golden blood. Motherfucker. You want to do this the hard way? Fine. You won't let me in. I don't care what you want. I'm forcing my underworld into that slot, and there is nothing you can do to stop me. Furious at the dying tree's stubborn resistance, Hawk casually wiped the blood from his mouth. He sat cross-legged on the soil of his underworld, glaring upward and still swearing. It's just you and me here now. Let's see who breaks first. I'm giving you one last chance. Don't make me destroy you. As he spoke, Hawk closed his eyes. The spectral projection of the phoenix burst to life behind him. Perhaps because he had just expelled 2 mouthfuls of his blood, the phoenix's projection this time was significantly dimmer, with edges that blurred and shifted uneasily. And the moment Hawk closed his eyes, time lost all meaning in the void. Who knows how long has passed? Behind him, dark and shadowy mist started to rise from the underworld soil. The mist silently gathered and gradually shaped into a human-like figure. The shadow figure appeared, watching Hawk from behind as he burned his golden cosmo, stubbornly struggling against the rustling canopy of the world tree. The shadow figure licked its lips, a cruel anticipation visible on its featureless face. Its dark, misty right hand started to form a blade, a very unique, distinctly black blade. It was darker than darkness itself. Darker than the shadow figure ever was. But as the shadow's grip on the blade tightened, it appeared to pause. It stopped moving forward, observing as Hawk's body suddenly became stiff. Just as the shadow figure was about to dissipate and retreat. Puffed. With a last defiant shudder from the world tree, showing it would rather break than surrender, Hawk convulsed and violently coughed up a torrent of golden blood. In the next instant, the shadow figure acted without hesitation. It emerged suddenly from its misty hiding spot, covering the distance with 3 quick strides. Holding the dark blade with both hands, it jabbed the weapon directly into Hawk's back, burying it completely as it pierced through his chest. Hawk screamed in agony. Chapter 283, 387, The Fall of Hawk. Sitting cross-legged in his underworld, Hawk threw his head back and screamed. The sound was animal. Nothing but pain. It had been so sudden. And Mephisto, who had appeared behind him without a sound, didn't stop. He tightened his grip on the pitch-black blade of death and drove it into Hawk's back, pulling it out and plunging it in again and again. Squelch. 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 Every time Mephisto ripped the blade of death from Hawk's body, a geyser of golden blood followed it. The golden blood sprayed wildly. It stained the ashen soil of the underworld. It splattered across Mephisto's clothes and coated his face. Mephisto's face was twisted in rage. Ignoring the scorching gold blood on his skin, he attacked in a blur, his arm pumping like a piston as he stabbed the chief god over and over. Soon, the spectral projection of the phoenix surrounding Hawk shattered. Thud. By the time Hawk's body slumped forward onto the soil, his chest and back had been reduced to a bloody ruin. Actually, it was worse than a ruin. He was butchered. Lying on the ground of his own realm, Hawk was gasping for air. Every breath was a wet rattle. He looked like a man with only a few seconds left on the clock. As he fell, the figure holding the blade of death, his face dripping with golden blood, finally came into Hawk's line of sight. When Hawk realized that the man who had stabbed him in the back was Mephisto, his pupils went wide. His face showed nothing but disbelief. Mephisto. I'm sorry. Mephisto looked down at Hawk, whose face was turning an ashen gray. He let out a long breath, releasing the tension wound tight in his chest. Meeting Hawk's stare, his face stiffened, and he offered a sincere apology. Hawk's mouth opened and closed. His ruined chest heaved like a broken bellows. He stared up at Mephisto, forcing the words out. Why? His voice dripped with confusion and betrayal. I thought we were allies. I'm a demon. Mephisto wiped the golden blood from his eyes. The solemn look vanished. In its place was a sneer of open mockery. You can never trust a demon. Especially me. You shouldn't trust a single word that comes out of my mouth, let alone my promises. You said that yourself, Hawk. Hawk's eyes widened. But I promised you. I promised to make you the king of my underworld. I know. And I'm grateful for the offer. Mephisto nodded without hesitation. He shrugged. But given the choice between being your king of the underworld or being a chief god myself, I'll take the promotion. He, Mephisto, was an ambitious man. King of the underworld was a step up. But becoming a chief god, that was the prize. Of course, being the lord of an afterlife for a celestial tier entity wasn't a bad gig. But being a chief god, the sky was the limit. He would answer to no one. So, I want to move up in the world. Is that a crime? Mephisto thought to himself. He met Hawk's dying gaze, then looked down at the blade of death in his hand. He looked back at Hawk and flashed a wicked, toothy grin. I know you're wondering how this weapon was able to hurt you. It's because it's forged from a law of death. The law of death from the world tree. Let alone you, if we were within the boundaries of the world tree, even my boss, the cosmic entity Death herself, would be screwed if I stabbed her with this. Hearing Mephisto's blasphemy delivered so casually, Hawk's pupils contracted. Mephisto chuckled. Don't look at me like that. Like I said, I'm just ambitious. There's no crime in wanting a better job. Besides, we're in the world tree right now, not the primary universe. So I can talk as much trash about Death as I want, and she won't hear a damn word. You talk too much. Just as Mephisto was savoring his villain monologue, gloating over the dying hero, a cold voice cut through the air behind him. The next second, another figure stepped from the shadows. Hela. But this wasn't the Hela who had fought Thor on Asgard. This Hela was something else. Half of her face was beautiful, pale and regal. The other half was dead. The skin on that side was translucent, clinging tight to the bone, revealing the dark corrupted veins beneath. Her eye socket was sunken, the eyeball itself a milky sightless gray. She looked like half living, half corpse. At the same time, the realm of Helheim, which Hawk had assumed was destroyed along with Asgard, began to materialize from the swirling shadows around them. Lying on the ground with his vitality fading fast, Hawk looked at Hela. His face changed from betrayal to shock. It's you, but you were. My power is drawn from the soil of Asgard. Hela stopped beside Mephisto and looked down at Hawk with a cold smirk. But I am still the goddess of death. Not just Asgard's goddess of death. I am the goddess of death for the world tree. Hawk drew in a sharp breath. But the sudden intake of air tore through his ruined chest. He fell into a violent coughing fit, spitting up more golden blood. His complexion grew even more ashen, he looked as if he might die at any second. Hawk forced himself to stay conscious. He looked from Hela to Mephisto. Then, as if accepting that this was the end, the shock faded from his face. What replaced it was a grim quiet. He lay flat on the ashen soil, his voice eerily calm. So, when did you two team up? We just realized we had mutual interests. Mephisto smiled pleasantly. He looked down at Hawk, who had clearly given up, and decided to humor him. Do you remember 3 Earth years ago? The convergence of the 9 realms. Hawk's mind flashed back 3 years to London, the battle with Malekith at Stonehenge, the moment he grasped the sixth sense and ascended to Silver Saint. But that wasn't the point. The point was, as Mephisto spoke, Hawk remembered that brief glimpse he had caught of Hela during the convergence. Because of the convergence, even though Hela couldn't escape her prison, the dimensional barriers thinned enough for us, 2 entities aligned with death, to have a brief chat. That was when I told her that the world tree was destined to fall into the primary universe. I am a subordinate of death. And a favored one at that. So I knew a thing or two about the fate of the world tree. To tell you the truth, before you ever showed up, my plan was to seize the position of Death Lord for the world tree. After all, once the world tree fell into the primary universe, Hela's authority as the goddess of death would be revoked by the cosmic entity Death. But then, you showed up. And you brought the authority of a chief god. Being a Death Lord is nice, but being a chief god. For me, that's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So, Hela and I made a deal. Hela gets to become the new chief god of the world tree, and I get to become the chief god of the Phoenix. Mutual assistance. A win-win. Therefore, I didn't betray our covenant, Hawk. I just made a deal with Hela first. You were a little late to the party. Mephisto went on, determined to make sure Hawk understood exactly how he had been outplayed before he died. Hawk's face grew grayer by the second. But don't worry, Hawk. After you die, your soul will go to Hela's Helheim, and I promise you'll receive the VIP treatment. In her realm, you'll be treated like royalty. Aside from the fact that you'll be dead, whatever you want, we'll make sure you get it. Having delivered his grand speech, Mephisto crouched down next to Hawk, looking into his dimming eyes. We were never officially allies, Hawk, so it wasn't a betrayal. It's just the nature of the game. Winners take all, losers lose everything. Don't blame me. Blame yourself for being too soft. You knew you couldn't trust a demon, but you wanted to believe in me anyway. You brought this on yourself. Hawk's pupils were almost clouded over with gray. Hearing Mephisto twist the knife one last time, he managed a weak smile that looked more like a grimace. But he didn't argue. Because. You're right. I was soft. When you called me brother, I wanted to believe that you could change. Unfortunately. I gave my heart to the moon, but the moon chose to shine on the gutter. Whatever. I guess I brought this on myself. Hawk's voice was fading. In what seemed to be his final moments, he looked at Mephisto and asked one last question. How were you so sure I would come here? Well, about that. Mephisto couldn't help but chuckle. He looked at Hawk. I'm a demon, Hawk. You know this. A demon's greatest weapon isn't our magic or our strength. It's our ability to play with people's minds. Remember when I suggested you use the heaven dimension as an anchor to manifest your universe? Hawk's voice was barely a whisper now. He was fading fast. The heaven dimension. Yahweh, you set that up. No. Mephisto shook his head. All of that was real. I just sensed that you were already suspicious by nature. So I gave it a nudge. I planted 2 seeds in your mind. The first, that a dimension could be used as an anchor. The second, that heaven was a trap. Once you figured out that manifesting your universe in the primary reality would trigger a temporal trap, it was only a matter of time before you set your sights on the world tree. Hawk listened to Mephisto lay it all out. A look of late tragic understanding washed over his face. But, he had to admit one thing. Brilliant. Thank you. Mephisto beamed, looking down at Hawk, who was now at death's door. Anything else you want to know? Once your soul crosses over to Hellas realm, I won't be able to visit you very often. Hawk shook his head. He looked at Mephisto, and a faint smile touched his lips. Thank you, Mephisto. Don't mention it. Hawk didn't say another word. He let out a long shuddering sigh and closed his eyes. The next second, his body turned into a shower of golden light, fading into nothingness. Chapter 284, 388, A Father's Love. An ear-to-ear grin spread across Mephisto's demonic face. He stared at the spot where Hawk had dissolved into a shower of light. Only one thought rang in his mind. Finally. It's my turn to step up. Now, all he had to do was snatch that phoenix out of the sky, and he would undergo the ultimate evolution, from a dimensional lord to a chief god. Mephisto tilted his head back. His eyes flashed with hunger as he looked up at the golden phoenix perched high atop the world tree, its wings spread in all their blazing glory. But just then, Hela, who had been standing silently behind him, stiffened. A cold shock spread over her pale features. Wait. His soul. It didn't enter my Helheim. What? Mephisto snapped out of it, whipping his head around to stare at his supposed ally. It hadn't been hard for him to recruit Hela. The reason was obvious. No matter what Odin wanted or how hard he tried to change fate, he had locked Hela away. Over the centuries, her hatred only grew stronger and more bitter. She hated the Vanir of Vanaheim for being cowards and letting her be imprisoned without helping. That's why she sent her undead army to destroy their realm and wipe out everyone there. And she hated Asgard just as much. Vanaheim was her mother's homeland, but Asgard was her own. Her own people had stood by and watched as her father cast her into the dark. Because of this, even though her power was tied to the soil of Asgard, her hatred for it surpassed even her hatred for Vanaheim. To put it bluntly, even if Loki hadn't released Surtur to trigger Ragnarok, Hela would have found a way to unleash the fire demon herself. She would have burned Asgard to the ground with her own 2 hands. She would rather scorch the earth and spend the next 50,000 years rebuilding from the ashes. Building a new Asgard. An Asgard that belonged to her alone. So, when Mephisto had laid out the truth about Ragnarok and his plan to usurp the Phoenix, it was a match made in hell. They wanted 2 different things. A perfect alliance. She wanted the world tree wiped clean and ready to be rebuilt. Mephisto wanted the authority of the Phoenix. But just now, according to the laws of reality, the moment Hawk fell, his soul should have been drawn into Hela's domain, Helheim. Yet Hela had felt nothing. Hawk's soul hadn't appeared. Hearing this, the grin on Mephisto's face vanished. The next moment, he realized what it meant. His demonic form dissolved into a plume of thick black smoke. Motivated by instinct, he attempted to sink back into the soil of Hawk's underworld, intending to slip through the backdoor portal they had created and flee to his own hell dimension. But as he moved to sink, the underworld was gone. The ashen soil upon which Mephisto and Hela had been standing ceased to exist. At the exact same moment, a hairline fracture appeared in the sky above them. At first, it was a single crack. Microscopic. But the instant it appeared, millions of others spiderwebbed outward, racing across the fabric of the sky. In the blink of an eye the fractures connected, covering the atmosphere in a dense jagged web. As the lines of force intersected. Crack. With a sound like breaking stained glass, the false world shattered into sharp pieces that fell like rain. Mephisto and Hela felt a burst of dizziness. When their eyes cleared, the world around them had changed. They were still standing before the world tree. But this was no longer the dying Yggdrasil. It had been transformed. This was the Parasol World Tree. The phoenix graces only the most sacred of lands, and rests upon no branch but the Parasol Tree. Mephisto stared in horror. The wound Surtur had carved into the trunk of the World Tree was gone. The tree no longer looked weak or lifeless. It stood tall and full of life, its huge leaves rustling with a sound that almost seemed happy. High above, in the void where Asgard had formerly been, stars were colliding and shattering and reforming. Drawn by the gravitational pull of the World Tree, a new divine realm was coalescing from the cosmic dust. The phoenix remained perched at the apex of the Parasol World Tree, its wings fully extended. It gave off a blinding gleaming light, a new, eternal sun, lighting the birth of the new realm and bathing the surviving worlds in its warmth. Of course. That bright light also fell upon Mephisto and Hela, exposing them. But the smile had gone from Mephisto's face. He'd been played. Roar. Unable to contain his rage, Mephisto shredded his human disguise. He reverted to his true 10-foot-tall demonic form. Boiling sulfuric heat flared from his nostrils as he threw his arms wide and bellowed. Hawk. Heh. A soft clear chuckle resounded from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Hawk's figure manifested, stepping from the trunk of the Parasol World Tree. He was sitting cross-legged, hovering in the air, resting his chin on one hand. His golden pupils gleamed with cold amusement as he looked down at the enraged demon. He shook his head slowly, letting out another soft laugh. Come on, Mephisto. Why so angry? If anyone should be pissed off right now, shouldn't it be me? Mephisto froze, the rage stalling in his throat. Hawk's smirk deepened. Besides, I warned you, remember? I told you, I only ever give someone one chance. One warning. But for you, Mephisto, I gave you more chances than I've given anyone in my life. To be fair. Hadn't he treated Mephisto well? Even at the very end, just moments before Mephisto drove the blade into his back, Hawk had tried one last veiled attempt to talk him off the ledge. He had framed it as an argument with the World Tree. I'm giving you one last chance. Don't make me destroy you completely. If Mephisto had stayed in the shadows and walked away, Hawk would have pretended he had never seen him. The betrayal would have never happened. So. Ask yourself, Mephisto. Was I not good to you? I treated you well. Do you know why? Because you called me your good father. Even though you proved to be a treacherous son, for the sake of that instant of father-son bonding, I chose to give you one last chance to turn back. But you threw it away. Hawk's mind darted back to the image of Mephisto clutching his hand, crying crocodile tears, and begging, Daddy, help me out. And then he looked at the demon standing before him, a demon who hadn't just plotted treason but had tried to murder his own father. Hawk let out a heavy sigh. The sigh of a parent whose child has broken their heart. As Hawk spoke, a flash of emotion flashed across Mephisto's demonic face. But at that final sigh, his expression blackened to a murderous black. Yet one burning question still gnawed at his mind. Mephisto spoke in a rough growl. When did you start suspecting me? Suspect? Ha. Hawk, sitting comfortably in midair, chuckled at the question. I never trusted you in the first place, Mephisto. So how could I suspect you? Why do you think I gave the Western Hemisphere back to you? Mephisto's expression changed. Hawk smirked. You told me yourself. You warned me that Yahweh could manipulate souls to create an angel of death. But between the two of you, you're the master of soul manipulation. If a complete amateur like Yahweh could pull a stunt like that, wouldn't an expert like you be able to quietly slip into my underworld through the souls passing between us? Did you really not notice? After I gave you back the Western Hemisphere, every single soul that was processed into my realm, I dumped them out on the barren soil. I never let a single one of them inside the true perimeters of my underworld. I was planning to wait and see what kind of trick you were going to pull. But then. You called me your good brother. You called me your good father. And I softened. I gave you back the Western Hemisphere, hoping that the gesture would make you realize your mistake. Hoping you would wake up and change. But my hints went right over your head. You want to know how I finally figured out you were going to betray me? Mephisto's face was black with fury. How? The defining trait of a rebellious son is disobedience. They say one thing to their father's face and do the opposite behind his back. Let me ask you, did you ever stop the proliferation of darkness and evil on Earth? Mephisto froze. Hawk saw the hesitation and shook his head. See. A rebellious son to the very end. Not only did you ignore your father's orders, but you tried to lie to me. You spun this whole story about leaving to conquer the multiverse, claiming you needed an open gateway between my underworld and your hell so you could access souls while you were away. I knew what you were doing. Because I had already given the Western Hemisphere back to you. The few lingering souls you had slipped into my underworld weren't enough to act as an anchor point. You needed a direct conduit to slip through. So you needed an excuse to create a backdoor into my realm, allowing you to strike at the right moment. But even then, even knowing all of that, right up until the last second, I considered giving you one more chance. After all, a son can betray his father 1,000 times, but a father will always love his son like a precious treasure. Hawk repeated the words he had yelled while battling the world tree. He sighed again, a genuine sound of parental disappointment, and looked down at Mephisto. As a father, Mephisto, I have no more words for you. He had never given any of his enemies this kind of leniency. Hawk gave one warning. One chance to survive. He never gave a second. Only Mephisto. He had given Mephisto multiple chances, all because the demon had called him good father. And how had Mephisto repaid that kindness? Unbelievable. Every time Hawk offered him an out, Mephisto had treated it like a homing beacon, dodging the lifeline and marching straight into the execution chamber. So, what else could Hawk do? If he didn't want the face Hawk offered, then Hawk would just rip his face off. Hawk shook his head. Don't worry, Mephisto. Out of respect for our time as father and son, I won't erase you. When your soul enters the underworld, I'll make sure you have a place. The magma prison. It will be your new domain. You can do whatever you want in there. Consider it my final act of paternal mercy. Father. Hearing Hawk patronize him one last time, Mephisto lost his mind. The last shred of his sanity snapped. He yelled. You want to be my father? I already killed my real father. You can go join him in hell. With that, Mephisto spun around, screaming to Hela. Hela. With me. We kill him now. You're on your own. Chapter 285, 389, Master of the Parasol World Tree. Hela. With me. We kill him now. You're on your own. Hawk's rebellious attitude finally pushed Mephisto too far. Furious, Mephisto let out a roar and got ready to attack Hawk, expecting Hela to back him up. And then, he froze. Mephisto stared at Hela, blinking as if he hadn't heard her right. What did you just say? I said, you're on your own. Hela was no longer wearing her obsidian antler headdress. Her dark hair lay loose around her shoulders as she gave Mephisto a cold stare from under her pointed, arched eyebrows. She looked at the stunned demon like he was an idiot. Believe in yourself. You can do it. Hearing this, and seeing that she meant it, Mephisto's pupils contracted. He sucked in a sharp breath, his face showed disbelief. Do you think he's going to spare you? We're allies. I'm sorry. What? You can never trust a demon. Wah. Heh. Mephisto whipped his head around, his gaze snapping back to Hawk, who was still sitting on the trunk of the world tree. Hawk was smirking. Resting his chin in his hand, he raised his right hand and pointed at Hela, as if introducing an old friend at a party. Oh, by the way. Allow me to introduce you. Hela, goddess of death. My death. Mephisto's heart, already sunk, seemed to stop completely. But. Impossible. I don't believe it. Die. Mephisto lost control. Feeling humiliated, he yelled in anger, raised his huge clawed hand, and swung at Hela. Hela, dressed in her sleek dark green bodysuit, remained unfazed. She delivered a single high kick, swift and precise. The next second. Boom. Mephisto was launched backward, tracing a parabolic arc through the air before crashing down with a thud that shook the ground. Struggling, he pulled himself out of the crater his body had made. And then, he saw them. Hela and Hawk, standing side by side. Hela stared at the furious demon, her expression blank. Hawk stood with his hands in his pockets, looking at Mephisto like a tired father dealing with a disappointing son. Believe me now. Mephisto felt a cold despair settle over him. He stared at Hela, who was standing by Hawk's side. I don't understand. Hela was his ally. How had everything flipped? Why was she standing with Hawk? Hawk looked at Mephisto's face, which screamed, I won't rest in peace unless you tell me how you did it. He chuckled and turned to Hela. Should we tell him? Sure. Why not? Hela kept her icy gaze on Mephisto. Hawk nodded. He looked back at Mephisto, who was clearly desperate to know, and shrugged. Because Hela is me. Question mark. Mephisto heard the explanation and assumed Hawk was talking nonsense. But just as he was about to curse him out, he saw Hela, standing next to Hawk, flash him a wicked smirk. The next second, her body dissolved into a shower of blood-red light, spreading into the air. And then, Hela was gone. In her place, hovering where she had stood, was a dark blood-red gem. Hawk pulled his right hand from his pocket and opened his palm. The gem drifted into his grasp, sinking into his palm and vanishing. Mephisto's mind staggered. The reality stone. Exactly. Hawk slipped his hand back into his pocket, offering Mephisto a polite smile. What Hela? There was no Hela. Hela had teamed up with Mephisto to ambush Hawk, but Mephisto misjudged his opponent's intelligence. A red wedding ambush might be considered a shocking betrayal. But to someone whose soul carried the weight of 5,000 years of Eastern history, overflowing with treacherous banquets and backstabbing alliances. From the first time Mephisto tried to trick him, Hawk's trust in him disappeared completely. But if Mephisto wanted to pretend to surrender, Hawk was happy to play along. He hadn't wanted to deal with the hassle of taking over the authority of life and death on Earth anyway. So he accepted Mephisto's fake surrender and treated the demon like a dancing monkey, sitting back and watching him perform. Similarly, Hela, in her alliance with Mephisto, had overestimated her own cunning and underestimated Hawk's speed. Just as Hawk had suspected. During her fight with Surtur, Hela had been holding back. She knew Asgard was doomed, so why waste her energy fighting a lost cause? It was smarter to conserve her strength for a sneak attack on Hawk alongside Mephisto. Why go down with the ship when you can hijack a newer one? But Hawk was too fast. Way too fast. Question: at what exact moment did Hawk take control of the World Tree? He had seized control of the World Tree in the fraction of a second before the primary universe's timeline swallowed it. The logic was straightforward. The World Tree had been severed. Hawk had repaired it, transforming it into the Parasol World Tree. But that meant the World Tree was now Hawk's Parasol World Tree. The original World Tree died the moment it snapped. In that instant, Hawk took possession of the World Tree, using his near-infinite cosmo energy to repair it and elevate it to Parasol status in one motion. He was the Lord of the World Tree. He was its new chief god. And so, Hawk acquired 100% of the World Tree's divine authority, including the fragments of power Odin had distributed to others. Like Thor's authority as the god of thunder. But Hawk returned the thunder authority to Thor the second he recalled it. Again, business is business, personal is personal. Hawk drew a clear line between the two. He hadn't known about Hela's alliance with Mephisto at first, but his suspicions were raised when he saw Hela getting beaten by Surtur like a child. So the moment he took control of the World Tree and realized Helheim hadn't been destroyed, his first act wasn't to return Thor's power. It was to strip Hela of her authority as the goddess of death and grant her the gift she embodied. Death itself. If she wanted to pretend to be dead to fool him, he would make it real. What? Keep her alive. For what? Her looks. Please. Hawk was a one-woman man. As an ally. Even less appealing. Hawk knew better than to keep someone like Hela around. If she was willing to stab Odin in the back, what would she do to him? In short, Hawk didn't need Hela, and he wouldn't trust her. So, Hela died. And to be safe, Hawk didn't bother keeping her soul. He incinerated it on the spot, wiping out any chance of her causing future problems. As the saying goes, better safe than sorry. Caution is the ship that sails 1,000 years. Only after he had dealt with Hela for good did Hawk return Thor's power of thunder. That was why Thor had felt his power vanish for a few terrifying seconds. The rest was simple. Hawk used the reality stone to manifest Hela and his Cosmo to manifest a duplicate of himself. He baited Mephisto out of hiding and played along with the demon's little stage play. Listening to Hawk lay out the sequence of events, Mephisto's massive 10-foot frame began to tremble. So, you've been playing me from the start. Hey. Hawk looked at the despair and hatred written across Mephisto's face. He waved off the accusation. I gave you a chance. You're the one who threw it away. Mephisto was beside himself. You played me. Whatever you need to tell yourself. Hawk couldn't be bothered to explain it again. He tossed off the remark, then a thought seemed to strike him. He looked at the demon. Although I should probably say thanks, Mephisto. Mephisto's furious expression froze. I was in a bad mood earlier. Hawk spoke honestly. But watching you put on this little performance, it cheered me up. Hearing this, Mephisto met Hawk's eyes. Does that mean you'll let me go? Ha, ha ha ha. Hawk blinked in surprise, then burst into laughter. Real laughter. Seeing Hawk laugh, Mephisto forced a desperate grin and joined in. But quickly, Hawk's laughter stopped. His expression went cold. No. What? I've given you too many chances, and you've wasted every one of them. I've been more than generous. Hearing Hawk's refusal, Mephisto's small hope vanished. He let out a soft growl. You think you can kill me? You hiding an ace up your sleeve. If you kill me, death will never let you get away with it. Heh. Hawk snapped back to reality and scoffed. He looked down at Mephisto. This is my universe now. My rules. Your boss Death can't even enter this place. Mephisto raised his voice, trying to use the cosmic entity Death as a shield to buy himself a chance. But on the outside. Goodbye, Mephisto. Hawk cut him off. He raised his right hand, then, as if suddenly struck by an idea, his eyes brightened and he corrected himself. Actually, I mean good riddance. I've thought about it, and having you in my underworld will only be a hassle. So just die. Seeing Hawk raise his hand, Mephisto's face distorted in panic. Why? Snap. Chapter 286, 390, Anna, the new goddess of death. Snap. The crisp snap of Hawk's fingers resounded throughout the world tree. Before him, Mephisto, still motionless mid-stride, his right hand clawing toward Hawk, shuddered as the sound reached him. His demonic form locked into stillness. And then he turned to dust. The demon lord's towering body withered at a visible rate, like a sandstone statue subjected to an eternity of wind in a single second. From left to right, he crumbled into gray ash and blew away into the void. By the time the sound of Hawk's snap faded, Mephisto was gone. Erased. Not even a trace of his soul remained. Hawk had planned to lock Mephisto in the magma prison of his underworld to suffer for eternity. But he changed his mind. Mephisto was treacherous by nature, a creature of sheer malice. Keeping him alive, even in chains, carried the same risk as keeping Hela alive. So, better safe than sorry. Wipe him out. End the problem for good. Hawk looked at the vacant spot where Mephisto had been, let out a slow sigh, and shook his head. The next second, Hawk looked up, his body melding into motion. He reappeared at the peak of the world tree and settled back into a cross-legged position. Scree. The phoenix graces only the most sacred of lands and rests upon no branch but the parasol tree. As Hawk closed his eyes, the cry of the phoenix echoed throughout the cosmos. The metallic phoenix construct, crafted from the gold cloth, dissolved away, revealing a genuine ethereal phoenix. Drenched in golden flames, it stretched and spread its wings wide, towering over the sky. Its blazing wings formed a luminous canopy above the world tree. On those fiery wings, the faint silhouette of a universe, much larger than the world tree, began to shimmer into existence within the golden flames. The sight was staggering. Under the parasol world tree, the phoenix served as the protector of the middle realm. Its wings supported the Hawk's phoenix universe above. It appeared just as it should, a planet-sized phoenix wreathed in golden fire, with talons clutching the ancient roots of the world tree and wings sustaining the phoenix universe. As the phoenix appeared, Hawk's physical form appeared to blend and merge with the fiery being. The two became one. The next moment, a flat earth realm under a domed sky, Hawk's underworld, began a slow descent from the fiery wings. It phased through the flames and came to a solid rest in the void where Helheim had formerly existed within the roots of the parasol world tree. Thud. As the underworld settled into place and fused with the roots, a shake rippled through the cosmos. The wound closed, and the realm was restored. However, since Hawk had not yet brought his phoenix universe into the main reality, everything inside his inner cosmos remained somewhat spectral. But there was a catch. He possessed the four elements of creation. The four elements of creation were tangible realities. This created a paradox. While his cosmos as a whole remained spectral, the stars and realms and domains forged within it were real. Therefore, Hawk could swap his tangible underworld into the empty slot left by the destruction of the world tree's Helheim. After all, Hawk was now the lord of both the phoenix and the parasol world tree. The two realms supported and reinforced each other. Neither could exist without the other. The good news. Hawk no longer needed the reality stone to project his phoenix universe into existence, nor did he need it to wield his full power within the primary Marvel universe. Because the primary universe had devoured Midgard, the world tree's property, and turned it into Earth. By absorbing an asset belonging to the parasol world tree, the primary universe had granted the power system of the parasol world tree full operational authority within its borders. Because the primary universe had played dirty and stolen what wasn't its. This was the price. The primary universe's intent had been cosmic robbery. It wanted the prize but refused to pay the toll. But Hawk had intervened, snatching the world tree back from the brink of assimilation, leaving the primary universe empty-handed and in debt. So, unless the primary universe returned Earth to the world tree, Hawk's power could flow through the primary universe without the reality stone acting as a conduit. But returning Earth was impossible. The primary universe had already swallowed it whole, digested it, and generated a new past to cement Earth's place in its timeline. How could it vomit it back out? It couldn't. The bad news. Because he had merged his realm with the world tree, Hawk would now have to wait until he achieved the ninth sense, the umlavajnana, before he could physically manifest his phoenix universe in full. Once again, a phoenix that wanders the earth and a phoenix that nests upon the parasol tree are two different entities in terms of power and scope. But there was better news. Hawk, whose grasp on the eighth sense had been vague at best, found his understanding deepening the moment he was crowned lord of the parasol world tree. He was still a fair distance from mastering the eighth sense. But this was a leap forward. No question. At that exact moment, on the banks of the river Styx, deep within Hawk's underworld, Anna, who had been enjoying an afternoon nap in her flower shop, jerked awake as the quake shook the realm. She stepped outside, standing near the murky waters of the Styx. And then she looked out toward the horizon. Before her eyes, a new world was coalescing from cosmic dust, stars forging themselves from fire, water, and wind. This is... Anna blinked, startled. She turned, her eyes lighting up as she saw Hawk standing behind her. Good afternoon, Hawk. Hawk lifted an eyebrow. Time doesn't exist in the underworld. What is this afternoon you speak of? I divided the cycles into 24 hours to keep myself sane. Fair enough. Hawk chuckled. Considering the time he had entered the world tree, he smiled back. Good morning, then. With that, Hawk turned his gaze back to the forming maelstrom of creation, the nascent realm preparing to replace the destroyed Asgard. His voice was tranquil. I'm going to make you the goddess of death for the parasol world tree. Following his gaze, Anna stared at the forming realm. She blinked, caught off guard. Goddess of death. Yes. Hawk looked at her shocked expression with a tender smile. Interested? Anna shook her head. No, I can't. I don't know how to be a god. If I say you can, you can. Ah. Hearing his conviction, Anna was at a loss. It took her a long moment to find her voice. Can I ask, why me? Hawk laughed softly. This realm needs a goddess of death, and you are my friend. It's a well-known fact. Hawk always favored his friends over logic or rules. Because Anna was his friend, he ignored her Hydra background. He would, without hesitation, ignore the war between S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra just because she called and asked for help. Even though that call had been a deception by Alexander Pierce. Oh. Speaking of which. Where was Alexander Pierce? Hawk's perception swiftly scanned Elysium. He noticed Pierce anxiously pacing near the sanctuary's border, maintaining distance after sensing Hawk's presence. Right, despite the fact that Hawk had pardoned Pierce during his Christmas Eve season of reunions, the former Hydra leader still made a point of disappearing whenever Hawk visited the underworld. Probably afraid Hawk might change his mind and drag him back to the torture cells. Anna looked up at Hawk after his explanation. All right, if you need my help, I'll do it. But just so you know, I've never been a god before. If I mess up, don't be mad at me. Hawk laughed, looking into her eyes. Even if you accidentally tear this whole realm apart, I wouldn't blame you. Worst case, we just rebuild it from scratch. Anna's expression turned serious. It won't come to that. I'll work hard. I'll learn how to be a proper goddess of death. One who can help you. I look forward to that day. Hawk's expression matched hers. He smiled and spoke. In the name of the Phoenix. In the name of the parasol world tree. Anna Pierce. You are hereby crowned the goddess of death for the Phoenix and the parasol world tree. Rumble. Hawk's voice, carrying the authority of a divine edict, thundered across every realm of the world tree, ringing in the ears of every living soul within its borders. As the edict fell, the world tree rustled its leaves in acknowledgement. The next second, a single glowing leaf drifted down from the branches stretching above the underworld. The leaf fell slowly on an unseen breeze but arrived almost at once. In an instant, the luminous leaf, symbolizing control over death within the world tree, landed on Anna and embedded itself in her body. Anna closed her eyes. A torrent of knowledge concerning the administration and laws of death flooded her consciousness like a river. At the same time, her clothing began to shift and reform. A flowing gown, made from the darkness of a midnight sky and the glow of shattered bone, laid itself over her form. Her shoulders were decorated with jagged armor plates resembling solidified magma from the hell prisons, curving into sharp angles. The cold detachment that had defined her as a top Hydra operative returned to her face. But, watching Anna design her own divine raiments based on her new knowledge, Hawk blinked. The outfit looked familiar. Opening her eyes, Anna, now the goddess of death, caught his expression and explained. I drew inspiration from the residual memories of the previous goddess, Hela. If you don't like it, I can change it too. Hawk's face cleared. Of course. No wonder it looked familiar. It was Hela's signature look. It's fine. Hawk smiled. I just thought it looked familiar but couldn't place it. So, do you know what you're supposed to do now? Anna nodded. Death and rebirth. Exactly. The goddess of death holds authority not just over the end of life, but also its beginning. Hawk nodded, looking at her with pride. I have high expectations for you. Chapter 287, 391, Frigga and the Halls of Valhalla. Things moved quickly. With Hela out of the picture, Anna, now the goddess of death chosen by Hawk, quickly got to work. Her first task was to find staff for her underworld. Hawk thought she would head straight to the prisons and pick her enforcers from the damned. But instead, Anna ignored the torment cells and went to the fields of Elysium, where the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents now lived in peace. Hawk was surprised at first, but then he understood. The S.H.I.E.L.D. agents in Elysium were the best of the afterlife, especially compared to the miserable souls in the prisons. They were a hand-picked team. And most importantly, Anna had been a top-tier Hydra operative. But like most high-level Hydra operatives, she had also been a capable S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. So it was only natural that she would recruit from the ranks of S.H.I.E.L.D. When Anna pitched her offer, the agents didn't hesitate. They agreed on the spot. They were already dead. Old rivalries, grudges, loyalties to acronyms, all of that had faded. Plus, they knew that the only reason they were enjoying eternity in Elysium, and the only reason Anna was standing before them as the goddess of death, was because of Hawk. Anna was the goddess Hawk had chosen himself. So why not work for her? Lounging around Elysium with nothing to do, not needing food or sleep, got boring after a while. It was especially dull for the agents who had died single. The ones with families had something to look forward to, they could wait for their wives and children to join them eventually. But the single guys didn't even have that. So joining the goddess of death's new administration seemed like a good gig. Hawk watched Anna build her forces and chose not to interfere. He observed quietly before leaving the underworld. He had said it before, if you don't know how to do something, you learn. He was giving Anna full autonomy to build her underworld empire and maintain the balance of life and death across the planets under her jurisdiction. If the results were good, everyone wins. And if she bungled it, no big deal. He'd hit the reset button, format the drive, and generate a new set of 8 realms. After all, the world tree was a happy accident. An unexpected bonus. The Phoenix universe was, and always would be, Hawk's true foundation. This was the perfect setup. He could let Anna use the world tree as a training ground. By the time he manifested the Phoenix universe, his goddess of death would be a seasoned veteran, ready to take the helm on day one. She wouldn't even need orientation. A solid plan. Just like his promise to make the Ancient One his god of time. Hawk watched Anna shaping the underworld to her vision, a faint smile on his lips. After a while, he turned away, deciding it was time to check out the world tree's hidden DLC map, Valhalla. Yes. Valhalla. The halls were meant to serve as the final resting place for the honored dead of Asgard. If Helheim was the world tree's hell, then Valhalla was its heaven. At first, Hawk had assumed Valhalla must have collapsed alongside the rest of the world tree. But then he reconsidered. It was unlikely. Because Hawk remembered the post-credits scene from Thor, Love and Thunder. Jane Foster, having died as the mighty Thor, had opened her eyes to find herself standing before the gates of Valhalla. And Heimdall had been there to welcome her. So Valhalla had to still exist somewhere. And since he couldn't leave the world tree to return to Earth anyway. True, his Cosmo energy had healed the world tree, restoring it and elevating it into the Parasol world tree. But the Parasol divine realm, the new domain forging itself from cosmic dust to replace Asgard, was still evolving. Until that new realm was complete and stable, the Parasol world tree remained vulnerable. There was still a chance, however small, that the primary universe's timeline could find a crack and slip through. Hawk operated on the principle of better safe than sorry. He hated sitting around waiting. Doing nothing made him restless, and the anger he had been holding down would start burning again. So, after leaving the underworld, Hawk teleported, reappearing in Vanaheim. Vanaheim appeared as a shattered world. The once imposing palaces and architecture were now scorched, crumbling ruins strewn across the ground. The realm was deserted, with neither living beings nor corpses. It appeared more like a realm of the dead than his own underworld. Hela hadn't just slaughtered everyone in Vanaheim. She had ground them to dust and scattered their ashes to the wind, leaving nothing behind. Well, that saves me a lot of cleanup. Hawk thought to himself, taking in the devastation. If there had still been Vanir alive when he took over the world tree, he wouldn't have known what to do with the citizens of the old regime. Now that Hela had wiped them out. Problem solved. After all, the living are almost always more troublesome than the dead. Hawk chuckled softly, then extended his senses. He detected the faint energy signatures of 2 pocket dimensions tethered to Vanaheim. He moved toward the nearest one. This wasn't Valhalla. This was the witch's domain. This is where I grew up. Hawk opened the entrance to the abandoned dimension and listened to the voice beside him. He turned to look at the woman he had brought with him from the underworld. The Queen of Asgard. Frigga. As everyone knows, Frigga had died by the hand of Curse, Malekith's enforcer. But because she had been murdered rather than falling in battle, her soul hadn't descended to Valhalla. Instead, she had been cast down into Helheim, which at the time was still sealed away with Hela. When Hawk had absorbed the souls from Helheim into his own underworld, he had assumed Hela had tortured Frigga out of existence years ago. He hadn't expected her to still be alive. She was battered, her spirit frayed, but yes, Frigga had survived. And now, under the restorative power of Hawk's energy, she had recovered. At this moment, dressed again in a flowing white gown with golden embroidery, her golden hair swept up, Frigga stared into the witch's domain. Like Vanaheim outside, it was a graveyard. Hawk's 7th sense swept across the barren dimension. He felt the lingering remnants of Hela's cruelty, and despite himself, he felt a sudden kinship with the goddess of death. He didn't think Hela's ruthlessness was wrong. You cross me? Fine. But you'd better make sure you kill me, because if you don't, I'll make you pay a price so terrible you'll beg for death. The commitment to disproportionate retribution. Hawk knew he operated on the same frequency. But because Hela was like him, holding grudges and demanding blood for blood, he could respect her, but he could never let her live. Hawk knew himself too well, which meant he understood Hela. Even if Hela had surrendered, maybe she wouldn't make a move for a year, a decade, or even a century. But the moment she saw an opening, she would stab him in the back. So Hela had to go. Hawk pulled his thoughts back and looked at Frigga. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Frigga averted her eyes from the wreckage of the witch's domain, her childhood home, completely destroyed by her stepdaughter. Her face showed a maternal expression, hiding her grief. I can only hope they found their way to Valhalla. I'm afraid they aren't in Valhalla. Hearing her hope, Hawk hesitated, then waved his right hand through the air. Like a reflection in rippling water, the residual soul fragments scattered throughout the dead dimension started to swirl and dance, forming into spectral images. It seemed as if time within the witch's domain was flowing backward. But this wasn't temporal manipulation. Hawk didn't have that power. Because he had already given away the power over time. The Ancient One was his god of time. Hawk had promised her the position, granting her the authority to weave and manage the timelines of his universe and all the lives within it. The scene playing out before them, like a film in reverse, wasn't the work of temporal laws. It was a reconstruction, formed by the fragmented memories trapped within the lingering shards of the witches' souls. Soon, the replay reached the moment of their massacre. Hellish necroswords rained down. One by one, the witches, overwhelmed by her undead soldiers, fell in pools of their own blood. Hela hadn't just taken their lives. She had shattered their souls. Forget Valhalla, these souls hadn't even made it to Helheim. The same fate had befallen the Vanir in Vanaheim. Frigga watched her people's destruction. She covered her mouth with a shaking hand, letting out a choked sob. Hawk looked at her and offered his condolences once more. Frigga struggled to stay calm and made herself look away from the replay of her people's last moments. Hawk waved his right hand again. He gathered every shattered soul fragment in the dimension and tossed them into his underworld. Frigga watched him, her confusion breaking through her grief. Hawk smiled. Perhaps, over the course of countless reincarnations, these fragments will find each other and become whole again. Thank you. Frigga's eyes widened as the weight of his gesture hit her. She thanked him again. But this time, her words meant something deeper. Hawk waved his hand without saying anything. A wave of the hand wasn't a dismissal. It meant no thanks were needed. Soon, Hawk and Frigga left the empty witch's domain. They crossed Vanaheim to the entrance of the second pocket dimension connected to the realm, Valhalla. As soon as Hawk touched the entrance, he sensed a difference between this place and the witch's domain. Simply put, the witch's domain felt artificial, like an extra pocket dimension attached to the world tree. Valhalla felt natural, like a fruit the world tree had grown but never fully developed into a real realm. A moment later, with a flash of white light, Hawk and Frigga disappeared from Vanaheim. Chapter 288, 392, Misery Loves Company. A dimension is not a space, nor is it a fully formed world. It is something in between. Because of this, a dimension has the shifting nature of spatial geometry, while also holding the recognizable contours of a physical realm. Skies filled with golden clouds. Ground made of rich dark earth. Rolling mountain ranges that never seem to end. Dense forests whose canopies reached into the clouds. Roaring rivers flowed by, and hidden among the mountains and trees along their banks stood tall buildings in the style of Asgard. On the entrance platform of the Valhalla dimension, golden light gathered and formed into shape. As it faded, Frigga, the former queen of Asgard, stood on the platform. Unlike her arrival, which was marked by a dazzling visual display, Hawk appeared beside her quietly, without any fanfare. After all, Hawk wasn't dead. Frigga was. According to the ancient laws, Frigga, having not died in combat, did not meet the criteria for entry into Valhalla. But now, Hawk made the rules. The Valhalla dimension belonged to the World Tree, which had become the Parasol World Tree. As its lord, Hawk's word was final. As soon as he entered Valhalla, his seventh sense swept over the place, noticing every detail. It was beautiful. But Hawk only gave it a glance. His eyes locked onto a figure standing not far from the entrance platform, on a pathway paved with what looked like diamonds. It was an old man with graying hair, wearing an eye patch. A gentle smile creased the lines on his aged face. Yes. Odin. Though Odin hadn't died in battle either, as the god-king of Asgard, the Allfather, his passing had granted him a place in Valhalla. Frigga gasped when she saw him. She ran to the men she had loved for thousands of years. They met in a desperate embrace. A reunion between husband and wife is always touching. Hawk didn't interrupt. He stood back, smiling quietly as he watched them embrace. After all, his reason for pulling Frigga out of the witch's dimension was to return Odin's queen to him. If Valhalla had been destroyed along with the rest of Asgard, he wouldn't have known what to do with the queen of the previous regime taking up residence in his underworld. Their embrace lasted only a few seconds before they stepped apart. They were king and queen after all. Public displays of affection weren't their style. It wouldn't have been dignified. After stepping back, Frigga gave a quick nod and walked toward the distant city of Asgard. As queen, she needed to comfort her people. Many had arrived in Valhalla suddenly, and the city was full of frightened souls. Odin watched her leave, then walked alone toward Hawk. Thank you. Don't mention it. Hawk met the old king's single eye, his brow arching. So, this was your master plan. Tell me, what made you so sure I'd play along and take the world tree off your hands? Hawk had only gone to that cliff in Norway to pick the old god's brain about the eighth sense and the concept of life. But right as he was leaving, Odin had dropped that cryptic warning. The traps of time are omnipresent. It was because of that sentence that Hawk had spent hours running simulations in his head, tracing out his future, only to find time's traps waiting for him at every turn. And that realization had led him to the concept of the Parasol Tree, and the idea that the World Tree could serve as his anchor. Which, in turn, led him right here. But was Hawk the real winner in all of this? No. The real winner was the old man standing before him. Odin got to spend eternity in Valhalla, and Hawk had hand-delivered his wife back to him. Reunited in paradise. Odin had outwitted him. Meeting Hawk's gaze, Odin offered a gentle smile. You got what you wanted as well, did you not? But I lost my wife. Hawk spoke calmly, his eyes fixed on Odin. The smile on Odin's face vanished. His single eye searched Hawk's face, and when he spoke, his tone was serious. I am sorry. Hawk didn't say a word. The truth was, Hawk had made himself a promise. If Odin had the courage to say something like, it's only temporary, or, my condolences, Hawk would have shown the old god what sorrow really meant, without a second thought. But a simple, genuine, I'm sorry. Hawk stayed silent. He closed his eyes, forcing down the anger that flared in his chest. When he opened them again, he offered a bitter half-smile and shook his head. You had your agenda, but you did warn me. And the truth is, without that warning, I never would have claimed the World Tree. It was a fact. If Odin hadn't warned him that time's traps were everywhere, he wouldn't have realized his plan was a dead end. He would have just sat back and watched the primary universe swallow the World Tree whole. Hawk looked at Odin, curious. Even if the primary universe had consumed the World Tree, Valhalla would have stayed intact. So, from your perspective, whether you warned me or not, the outcome for you wouldn't have changed. But the primary universe would have gained the World Tree. So, as long as it wasn't the primary universe, I don't care who took it. I see. Hawk's face relaxed. It was the same thinking Odin had used when he hoped Malekith would throw the 9 realms into darkness. In a word, Odin didn't care who was in charge. As long as it wasn't the primary universe. After all, it was the primary universe's time that destroyed his family and broke Asgard. It was pure spite. Hawk nodded, finally understanding the old king's reasons. He shook his head, let out a short laugh, and changed the subject. So, what are your plans now? Plans? Odin looked at Hawk, confused. You are the lord of the World Tree now. I am old and dead. It is time for my retirement. Hawk arched an eyebrow. Let me get this straight. You orchestrate this cosmic mess, leave me on the outside to deal with it, and you think you get to just sit back and enjoy a peaceful retirement. When did I ask you to clean up my mess? You just admitted it. A cold smirk touched Hawk's lips. If I had thought of taking the world tree on my own, I wouldn't have a leg to stand on. But I only thought of it because of your warning. So, from a certain point of view, it's your fault I'm stuck with this headache. Odin drew in a sharp breath. Phoenix, that is unreasonable. Is it? Be honest. If it wasn't for you, do you think I'd be dealing with this right now? But you gained the world tree. Forget the world tree for a second. Hawk waved his right hand. Setting aside the fact that I claimed the world tree, I'm asking you, do you believe you bear no responsibility for the state the world tree is in? This way of dodging the facts left Odin speechless. After a long silence, Odin took a deep breath and looked at Hawk. What is it you want? The souls in Valhalla cannot remain stagnant. They must flow. Hawk got straight to the point, laying out the real reason he had come. Life exists in its flow. A flowing stream of souls will nourish the world tree. And Valhalla is no longer just the heaven for Asgard, it is the heaven for the world tree. The system requires a complete overhaul. In the name of the Phoenix, and by the authority of the world tree, Valhalla is hereby reformed as the dimension of light. All souls born of the world tree, upon death, shall transit through the underworld. The guilty shall fall. The innocent shall ascend to the dimension of light. Odin shall be the god of light. Frigga shall be the goddess of darkness. From this day forward, the realms of the world tree shall be divided into day and night. As Hawk's edict vibrated across the world tree, the great branches shook, and 2 glowing leaves fell from the canopy. The first leaf fell and landed on Odin, who had been dreaming of a peaceful, everlasting retirement. Suddenly, a flash of light brought Odin back to life. His wandering robes disappeared, replaced by attire suitable for the god of light. At the same time, in the distance, among the people of Asgard, Frigga saw the second leaf and was struck by it. She was also brought back to life, her white gown changing into the dark, flowing robes of the goddess of darkness. Frigga was shocked. But not nearly as shocked as Odin. Odin stared down at his living body, then at his glowing vestments. Hawk had resurrected him without permission and drafted him into service. The old king was floored. How to describe the feeling? It was like the regime had changed, but instead of executing or imprisoning the old king, the new ruler had decided to put him to work on the assembly line. Odin inhaled sharply. Hiss. You dump this mess in my lap, force me to separate from my wife, and you think you get to wipe your hands clean, kick back, reunite with your wife, and enjoy eternity. Hawk let out 2 sharp laughs, glaring at Odin. During the day, you will bring light to the realms of the world tree. At night, Frigga will bring the darkness. A peaceful retirement. Reunited at last. I'm telling you right now, Odin, if I'm miserable, you can forget about being happy. Fine. He couldn't hold his anger back any longer. Why should Odin get to have a happy reunion? While he was forced into a separation from the woman he loved. Even if it was only temporary. Even if Gwen had told him that a temporary separation was just the price they had to pay for an eternity together. And yes, he had promised Gwen he would take the world tree. However, aside from his desire for the world tree, Odin was ultimately responsible for the current separation between him and Gwen. Retirement. In your dreams. A happy reunion. Keep dreaming. Until I find my Gwen, you two are day and night. Destined to never meet. Odin, meanwhile, was bewildered. And then, not only was he alive again, but his missing eye had returned. Unaccustomed to seeing with both eyes, he looked at Hawk silently for a long moment before sighing deeply. Just as he was about to speak, the entrance platform nearby gleamed with golden light, drawing the attention of both Hawk and Odin. Chapter 289, 393, Gwen's gone. Let it burn. The golden light faded. Heimdall stood on the platform. Hawk saw the soul return to the realm. He looked surprised for a moment, then raised his eyebrow. Heimdall was a being of the world tree, but not of the parasol world tree. However, Hawk had accepted the world tree and all its inhabitants. He hadn't dismantled Valhalla, he had rebranded it. As long as Heimdall died a warrior's death, his soul would be drawn back to the dimension of light, the new Valhalla. But that wasn't the issue. The issue was that Heimdall was dead. Thanos has already made his move. Why didn't I feel it? Hawk's thoughts raced. In an instant, his mind reached Nidavellir. He spoke directly into Eitri the Dwarf King's ear. Eitri. Lord Phoenix. Eitri, caught off guard by the voice, froze for a moment before dropping to one knee. Hawk skipped the small talk. He asked if Thanos had come to the forge after he left. When Eitri said yes, Hawk brought his mind back to the dimension of light. Okay. Thanos had been to Nidavellir. But just like in the original timeline, Thanos had gone there to do business with Eitri. No slaughter. No threats. Just a deal involving high-quality alcohol. As the most renowned artifact crafters in the world tree cosmos, the dwarves' love for top-tier liquor was famous across the primary universe. And Thanos was a repeat customer. Case in point, Thanos' double-bladed sword was made from URU metal, which only came from the world tree. They had done business before. When a paying customer showed up, Eitri had no reason to turn him away. The reason Hawk hadn't noticed the Mad Titan's visit was easy to understand. Thanos had left the borders of the world tree before Hawk had initiated his cosmic heist. And during the heist itself, Hawk had been hyper-focused, tuning out every distraction to concentrate on wresting control from time. But all of that was beside the point now. The main thing was that Thanos had acted. Like in the movie, he attacked the Asgardian refugee ship. Heimdall showing up in the dimension of light and meeting Odin again proved it. There was one major deviation from the original plot. This time, Thanos wasn't going to finish collecting the stones. Because the Reality Stone and the Mind Stone were sitting right here with him. Hawk considered this, then looked back at Heimdall, who had just met Odin again. Just then, Heimdall, having arrived in the dimension of light, learned from Odin why the world tree had vanished from reality. In a word, under new management. It hadn't been swallowed by the primary universe. It had been conquered by the men standing in front of him. Hawk was the new king of the world tree. So, when Hawk's gaze rested on him, Heimdall didn't hesitate. He dropped to one knee, bowing his head. God King. Rise. Hawk looked calmly at the former gatekeeper. Heimdall stood and started to speak. But before he could, another flash of golden light lit up the teleportation platform behind them. The light swirled, coalesced, and formed into a humanoid form. Ha! Fuck! Loki appeared on the platform, grasping his throat, gasping for air, and swearing. Clearly, his mind was still stuck in the moment when Thanos had crushed his windpipe. But the panic faded. Loki saw the polished floor under him. He looked up and spotted 3 people nearby, 2 familiar, 1 unknown. The first time Loki had visited Earth, he'd been busy tearing up Manhattan while Hawk was minding his own business in Queens. The second time, when he and Thor had come looking for Odin, Hawk was already in Nidavellir. So, Loki and Hawk had never met. Hawk looked at Loki, frowned for a moment, then let his face relax. Loki died trying to kill Thanos. He gave his life to save Thor and the Asgardians. That last act of bravery was enough for him to enter Valhalla. He deserved to be here. What about the god of stories, Loki, from the TVA? That Loki was from another timeline and had nothing to do with the one standing here now. This Loki, from the primary 616 universe, was dead. Loki's gaze darted between Odin and Heimdall, who had arrived just before him, before settling on Hawk. Who are you? Loki, this is. My name is Phoenix. Hawk Phoenix. Hawk cut off Heimdall's warning, meeting Loki's stare. He then turned to Odin. Make sure he doesn't leave the dimension of light. Loki wasn't Hela. To Hawk, Hela was an unacceptable risk. A threat that had to be put down. But Loki didn't have a fraction of Hela's power. But in many ways, he was more annoying. He was full of tricks. He wasn't powerful enough to kill anyone important, but he was a master at causing chaos and making a mess. So, Hawk didn't want to kill Loki, but he also didn't want him running loose in the Parasol World Tree and causing problems. The easiest answer was to keep him in the dimension of light. Asgard's problem child was Asgard's problem. Hawk didn't just tell Odin to watch him. To make sure Loki wouldn't slip out, Hawk issued a divine edict, sealing the trickster god within the borders of the dimension. Loki could no longer leave the dimension of light by any means. When Hawk introduced himself, Loki stopped and his eyes went wide. He looked at Hawk and quickly spoke again. You're Hawk. Quick, Thor is in trouble. He needs your help. Can't do it. What? I can't leave right now. Hawk was telling the truth. If he could leave, he would have left already. He had to stay and stabilize the Parasol World Tree. Until he was certain the primary universe had zero chance of breaching his world tree, he wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't setting foot on Earth until the job was done. Thanos' next target is Midgard. I don't care. What? If he wants to go, let him. Thanos will destroy Midgard. He's already slaughtered Xander. Let him. Hawk's face stayed blank. He looked at Loki, not moved at all by the attempt to make him feel guilty. If Gwen had been standing there, telling him Thanos was attacking Earth, that would be a different story. One word from Gwen, and Thanos wouldn't make it past the stratosphere. But right now, Gwen was gone. She wasn't on this version of Earth anymore. The calm anticipation he always felt knowing she was waiting for him at home, that was gone too. It was the main reason he wasn't in any rush to head back. Since Gwen wasn't there. Let it burn. It's not like Thanos was going to blow up the planet. He just wanted to implement his 50-50 population control theory. Let him try. Rain will fall, widows will remarry. Whatever happens, happens. It's not my problem. Loki stared at Hawk's flat expression. Aren't you one of Midgard's Avengers? Your brother is. I'm not. Hawk had never joined the Avengers. Sure, Tony and Steve had extended the invitation, but Thor had vetoed it. For two reasons. First, Hawk didn't want to join. Second, Hawk wasn't 21 yet, and he was strict about following the law. Thor had pointed out that having a kid on the team who couldn't legally drink would make their victory parties depressing. By the time Hawk turned 21, he was busy getting married, going on his honeymoon, and dealing with cosmic fallout. When he got back, Thor wasn't even on Earth. Loki was thrown by the revelation. Having clarified his stance, Hawk ignored Loki's shock. He turned to Odin, gesturing for the old king to accompany him somewhere private. Once Hawk and Odin had walked away, Heimdall explained the new reality of the world tree to Loki. The changing of the guard. The fact that Asgard was now the old regime. When Loki heard that Odin was now the god of light, and Frigga the goddess of darkness. He froze, his eyes snapping to Heimdall. Did you say? Mother. Where is she? She's. Heimdall turned to point her out, but a strong gust almost knocked him over. Before he could finish, Loki had already dashed off, running toward where Heimdall had shown. Standing on a grassy cliff in the dimension of light, Odin watched from above as Loki found Frigga and threw his arms around her. When Loki banished me to Earth, he did it because he blamed me for failing to protect her. Frigga wasn't his birth mother, but she was the only one who ever gave him a mother's love. Standing next to Odin, Hawk watched the reunion below and spoke his mind. This was another reason he hadn't killed Loki like he did Hela. A boy who loved his mother couldn't be rotten to the core. If Hela were a sociopath, Loki was a deeply insecure kid. Because he desired his mother's love and attention, he acted out, throwing tantrums and pulling stunts just to get her to look at him. He had done a lot of terrible things. But even if it meant getting scolded by his mother, just having her attention made him happy. When his father yelled at him, he argued back. When his mother yelled at him, he lowered his head and took it in silence, probably hoping she'd just keep talking to him a little longer. It sounded pathetic. And it was. Hawk watched from above as Frigga swelled with pride upon hearing Loki had died a hero's death to earn his place in Valhalla. Loki, in response, with a goofy smile of a child being praised by his mother. The next second, Hawk pulled his gaze away, turned to Odin, and got to the real reason he had asked to speak with him. I need to get my wife back. Chapter 290, 394, Thanos is coming. Yes, Hawk had decided. He would find the universe where time sent Gwen and bring his wife back. She was pregnant for God's sake. He refused to let Gwen face childbirth alone in an unfamiliar universe. His decision was clear, he would be there for her. Odin was surprised by how intense Hawk's question was and looked at him. You will get her back. It's only a matter of time. I know. Hawk kept his calm as he looked at Odin. But I don't want to wait. Waiting always took too long. He focused on the present. Sure, Odin was right. If he waited until he awakened the ninth sense and created the Phoenix primary multiverse using the Phoenix on top of the Parasol world tree as a conduit, he could get Gwen back. Hell, he wouldn't even have to look for her. Time itself would deliver her to his doorstep. But, he hadn't even mastered the eighth sense yet, and the ninth was still far out of reach. Odin saw Hawk's determination. He didn't try to talk him out of it. Instead, he thought about the problem and turned to the younger god. Can you sense which multiverse time pulled her into? That's the problem. Hawk frowned at Odin's question. The barriers between the dimensions of the primary Marvel multiverse were strong, but not impossible to cross. Except, when Time had sent his best friend Peter Parker away, Hawk could still sense him. He used the Cygnus bronze cloth pendant he'd given his godson, Ben Hawk Parker, as a beacon. He didn't know which multiverse Peter had been dropped into. But he could sense him. But Gwen. I can't sense her at all, Hawk said, turning to Odin. Gwen is my queen. Her existence is tied to my personal timeline. Odin processed this. He became quiet for a moment. It's not that you can't sense her. Then what is it? You're already exposed. Time knows what you're doing. Whenever you try to sense across the primary multiverse's temporal currents, time steps in. It erases the path you're trying to follow, so you only sense emptiness. Odin offered this explanation, then met Hawk's stare and let out a dry giggle. I tried it myself. You did. Of course. Odin shook his head and gave a small, sad smile. He explained that, in his search for answers, he had attempted to reach out to different versions of himself throughout the multiverse. However, he was met with only silence, as if he didn't exist in any other reality. Hawk's eyebrow shot up. Is it possible that you don't exist anywhere else? At this point. Yes. Likely. What do you mean? Time wasn't just targeting me, the Odin of this primary universe. It was targeting every iteration of the world tree across the primary multiverse. Ragnarok happened here. It happened everywhere else, too. But I doubt any of my counterparts in other universes were as fortunate as I am. Dead, supposedly retired, only to be brought back and forced to work again. Stick to the topic. Keep your personal grievances out of this. Hawk shot Odin a flat look. Do you have a solution or not? Odin shook his head. There are no good solutions. Crossing into the multiverse wasn't difficult. The real challenge was reaching the right one. If you didn't care where you ended up, it was easy. Technology. Magic. Some species even had innate abilities that let them jump from the primary universe into the multiverse. But once you made that jump, finding the right universe in an endless sea of possibilities was nearly impossible. And coming back. You could become lost in the multiverse forever. After all, we know this is the primary universe. But the inhabitants of every other universe believe theirs is the primary one, too. And the most critical issue. Time is watching you. The moment you make a jump, the moment you leave this reality, time will seize the opportunity to erase every trace of your existence from the primary universe's timeline. It might not be able to erase your past, but it can erase the memory of you from everyone you leave behind. Including the primary universe's own memory of you. Hawk. Odin's voice was filled with hard-earned wisdom. You have to understand, this was time's goal all along. Banish your wife to the multiverse to force your hand. It's trying to goad you into jumping into the unknown. Once you leave, you will never find your way back. Hawk said nothing. He knew Odin was right. Hawk had played his trump card and taken the world tree. Time was furious. Since it couldn't reach Hawk, it punished the person most connected to his timeline. He had brushed off time's retaliation as powerless anger, and for good reason. As long as Hawk held his ground and didn't panic, time's actions were a clown show. It couldn't hurt him, and it couldn't hurt Gwen. Hawk looked at Odin, surprised by the phrase. Gwen told me the same thing. Odin smiled softly. My wife, Frigga, told me that before she died. Even though she knew she couldn't enter Valhalla, in her final moments, she chose to comfort me. She told me not to let the anger of our separation blind me. She told me to stay calm and hold on to optimism for the future. Hawk understood. He looked down at the valley, where Frigga, now wearing the dark robes of the goddess of darkness, still moved with gentleness and compassion. Gwen is a lot like Frigga. Indeed. Odin nodded. A successful god-king can take many forms, a wise ruler, a foolish king, or a tyrant. As long as he protects his realm, he is competent. But a true queen is always gentle. Always kind. Frigga embodied that. And so did Gwen. Looking at Frigga, Hawk recalled the most recent conversation he had with Gwen before he left Earth to confront time. Hawk, a temporary separation is just the price we pay for an eternity together. So, go. Take back the world tree. Don't let that terrible thing steal it from you. Hawk recalled wanting to stay, but Gwen had urged him to leave. He chuckled softly, then shifted back to the current moment, took a deep breath, and focused on Odin. I'm leaving. Into the multiverse. Time took Gwen. I'm going to make sure it delivers her right back to me. Under Hawk's calm surface, anger was building. He made his promise to Odin, then disappeared in a flash of bright light. When he reappeared, he was sitting cross-legged at the peak of the world tree, resting his back against the towering phantom form of the phoenix gold cloth. He looked down at the vacant space where Asgard had formerly been. The Parasol Divine Realm, a flat disc-shaped world under a domed sky made to repair the hole Surtur had torn in reality, was taking shape quickly. Driven by the four elements of creation, the evolution of the new realm was nearing completion. The Parasol World Tree was participating too, funneling energy into the nascent realm to speed its birth. But no matter how quickly things moved, it couldn't be rushed. The realm still needed more time to become stable. A day or two, at least. Leaning against his golden armor, Hawk estimated the time required for the Parasol Divine Realm to form, then closed his eyes. The moment his eyes shut, the golden wings of the phoenix cloth folded forward, wrapping Hawk in a protective embrace. The next day. On Earth. Tony Stark and his new wife, Pepper Potts, were taking a morning walk through Central Park. Yes, Tony and Pepper were married. They had tied the knot a few days ago. The original plan had been a big June wedding. But a few days prior, they'd had a minor argument, mostly over the endless details of planning a huge event. In a moment of shared impulse, they had scrapped the whole thing, opting for a private ceremony with a handful of guests. Gwen had attended. She explained that Hawk was off-planet, unreachable, and sorry that he couldn't make it back in time. Tony and Pepper hadn't been disappointed by Hawk's absence. They were the ones who had changed the date and the scale of the wedding, after all. Tony and Pepper walked together, already bickering like a long-married couple. Just then, a shower of golden sparking energy flared in the air before them, spinning and tearing a circular hole in the fabric of reality. The next second, Dr. Strange, wearing his blue robes and the red cloak of levitation, stepped out of the portal. "Tony Stark, you need to come with me." He paused, registering the woman next to Tony. "Oh, and congratulations on the wedding, by the way." Pepper stared at the intruder, confused. Tony stepped in front of her. "I'm sorry, who the hell are you?" "I am Dr. Stephen Strange. I need you to come with me. The universe is at risk. We don't have much time." "We? Who's we?" "Tony." As Tony was starting to defend himself, a voice, familiar but oddly off, sounded from within the portal behind Strange. Immediately after, a visibly shaken Bruce Banner, seemingly from a different multiverse, tumbled out of the portal, his face pale with terror. "Thanos is coming." Chapter 291, 395, The Resurrected Banner and the Missing Gwen. At the dawn of the universe, there was nothing but a chaotic void. Then, boom. The Big Bang. From the epicenter of that cosmic birth, 6 singularities were compressed, condensing their power into 6 infinity stones. Each of these 6 stones holds dominion over a specific aspect of existence. Space. Reality. Power. Soul. Mind. And Dr. Strange, having pulled Tony Stark into the New York sanctum to deliver a crash course on the Infinity Stones, looked at the billionaire sitting opposite him. Strange lowered his gaze, his hands flashing through a seal to unlock the Eye of Agamotto on his chest. As the relic bloomed open, it revealed the emerald light of the gemstone within. Time. Tony Stark sat with his arms crossed, a deep frown creasing his forehead as he stared at the holographic projection of the 6 infinity stones Strange had conjured. "Give me the guy's name again." "Thanos." Before Strange could open his mouth, Bruce Banner, buzzing with anxiety, cut in. "Tony, you don't understand. He's a monster. He invades planets, slaughters half the population for kicks, and moves on. He has no conscience. None. And he already has the power and space stones. Tony watched Banner step toward him. He held up a hand, stopping him. Banner blinked, confused by Tony's posture and the strange look in his eyes. "Tony, it's me. It's Bruce. I know it's you." Tony cut him off, his voice flat. "But you're dead." Bruce froze. "What the hell are you talking about?" "During the raid on the Hydra base, my jet went down, but I managed to." "You died in 2013. You died in Wakanda." "What?" Bruce stared at Tony, his jaw slack. Tony wasn't joking. He was serious. Tony turned his gaze from the seemingly resurrected Bruce Banner to Dr. Strange. "Are you going to explain this, or what?" It wasn't that Tony hadn't considered the possibility. Had Hawk secretly resurrected Bruce Banner? But the thought had barely crossed his mind before he dismissed it. Hawk operated on a specific set of rules. He minded his own business, kept to himself, and loved nothing more than spending time with Gwen. But the moment someone crossed his line, he didn't just kill them, he erased their bloodline. And sometimes, their species. So, while Hawk might resurrect a random bystander, he would never resurrect an enemy he had killed. And Bruce Banner fell into that category. He was dead. And more importantly, the raid on the Hydra base. Bruce had died way before Hydra was even exposed. Unless his ghost had decided to tag along for the mission, his story made no sense. Dr. Strange looked at Banner, then back to Tony. "He is Bruce Banner, Tony. Just not our Bruce Banner. WH. He's Bruce Banner from a parallel multiverse," Strange explained before Bruce could interrupt. In his universe, it seems, he didn't cross paths with Hawk Phoenix. Hearing the name, Bruce's frown deepened. "Who is Hawk Phoenix?" Thor kept throwing that name around too. Tony raised an eyebrow and looked at Bruce. "Wait, Thor talked to you about him?" "Yeah. But I thought he was just messing with me." Tony looked at the confusion on Bruce's face and was struck speechless. Dr. Strange, seeing Bruce's bewilderment, raised his right hand. He traced a circle in the air, pulling a series of images from reality itself. The fate of this universe's Bruce Banner was projected into the eyes of his multiversal counterpart. After a few minutes, Bruce stood in silence. His mind raced as he processed the images of the entity, Hawk Phoenix, who had killed him twice over. I have no idea who that is. A multiverse is not the same as a parallel world, Strange clarified. While another version of us may exist there, the events and the people involved can be different. Some things that exist here don't exist there. Tony nodded, digesting the explanation. He looked at Bruce and offered a grim piece of advice. You should consider yourself lucky your universe doesn't have a hawk. Why? Bruce bristled. Is he that dangerous? Tony didn't answer. He turned his attention back to Dr. Strange. You said this Thanos guy wants to collect all 6 stones. Strange nodded. Yes. Then he's already lost. What? Reality. And mind. Tony pointed at the holographic projection Wong had conjured, targeting the red and yellow stones. He let out a short harsh laugh. Those 2 stones belong to Hawk. So, this Thanos you're terrified of? He has 0 chance of completing his rock collection. Unless he could kill Hawk. Which was, for all purposes, impossible. Don't forget. Hawk had once told Tony that if he was curious, he could borrow his Black Phoenix surplus for a week to study it. And Tony had. Let's just put it this way, the energy readings Tony had picked up from that single piece of armor dwarfed the energy output of Thor's hammer. By a factor of 100. Bruce stared at Tony, taken aback by his confidence. So, where is this Hawk guy now? Tony shrugged. No idea. He left Earth a few weeks ago for his honeymoon, and we have no idea when he's coming back. Pepper is on her way to see Gwen right now to find out if she has a way to contact him. Strange remained silent. Hearing another unfamiliar name, Bruce was confused. And who is Gwen? Okay, I'm convinced he's not our Bruce, Tony muttered to Strange, shaking his head. Just then. Tony's phone rang. It was Pepper. Tony. Gwen is missing. What do you mean, missing? It's not just her. Pepper, who had just arrived at 521A Palm Street, was standing next to a frantic Sharon Carter. After a quick exchange of information, she had called Tony. Her voice carried disbelief. The entire Stacy family is gone. They vanished. Tony's expression hardened. The next second. He thought of Westview. What about Westview? Pepper didn't answer. Just as dread began to form in Tony's stomach, Sharon Carter's voice came through the speaker. Westview is secure. The surveillance detail reports no unusual activity. We're heading there now. She was cut off. A portal of crackling golden sparks materialized on Palm Street. Out stepped Tony, Dr. Strange, and Wong. Anne. Dr. Banner. Sharon stared at the men bringing up the rear. The words spilled out before she could stop them. Did Hawk pardon you? Did he bring you back? Bruce, who was about to ask a question, lost all interest in playing along. The confusion on his face was replaced by irritation. Why did this Hawk guy want to kill me so badly? It's complicated. Don't ask. We don't have time to get into it. You fought the abomination and killed his sister in the crossfire. Amidst the chorus of dismissive answers, it was Dr. Strange who delivered the truth. Bruce blinked, the pieces falling into place. He gave a slow nod. Tony steered the conversation back to the crisis. How could Gwen just disappear? The agent assigned to her detail flagged it this morning, Sharon explained. Gwen went into her house yesterday afternoon and hasn't been seen since. When she didn't leave for work this morning, they contacted me. Could Hawk have taken her back out to space? No. Sharon shook her head. The satellite network didn't pick up the Phoenix energy signature entering the atmosphere. Plus, if they were leaving again, Gwen would have texted me. I'm going to Westview to see if Wanda knows anything. Hearing that, Dr. Strange opened a portal to Westview without hesitation. Only then did Sharon notice the men in the strange robes. She looked at him, recognizing the aura of authority. The Sorcerer Supreme? No. Strange offered a tight smile. Dr. Strange. Sharon offered a noncommittal, oh, and dropped the subject. Right now, nothing was more important than figuring out what had happened to Gwen. Because if Gwen had vanished under suspicious circumstances, the destruction of Earth could be minutes away. So, Sharon pinned her hopes on someone in Westview having an answer. And as it turned out, someone did. Gwen is missing. Wanda, who had been baking snacks for Billy and Tommy in the kitchen, was startled by the crowd at her front door. But as she listened to Sharon explain, she frowned. Her lab. Gwen told me a few days ago she was going to be busy at the lab. She said she might not come home for a while and asked if I could go over once a week to clean up the house. Pepper shook her head. I checked the lab. She hasn't been there. She's gone. Sharon leaned in. Are you sure she told you she was going to disappear for a while? Wanda shook her head as she ushered the group inside. She didn't say disappear. She just said she'd be working long hours at the lab and wouldn't make it home. Wanda then recounted how Gwen had been inviting her over recently, teaching her family recipes, and asking her to make sure Hawk was eating properly if she ended up working late. Hiss. Did Gwen know this was going to happen? Where did she go? You don't think Thanos took her, do you? Bruce Banner, who had followed them through the portal, spoke up, drawing everyone's attention. He laid out a hypothesis. You said this Hawk has 2 Infinity Stones. What if Thanos found him? What if Thanos already? He didn't get to finish. A small voice cut through the tension. Jean, who had been hiding at the top of the stairs, intimidated by the strangers, came running down. She glared at Bruce and shouted, "My daddy is fine. Nothing bad is ever going to happen to him." Wanda, startled by the outburst, looked at her daughter. An idea struck her. "Jean, can you sense where daddy is?" "Yeah." Jean nodded without hesitation. Chapter 292, 396, They don't want Hawk, they want the Hulk. "Yes, I can." When Jean's small voice piped up, the others might have missed it, but Sharon's face lit up. "Where is he right now, Jean?" "I don't know." Sharon's expression froze. Wanda turned to her daughter, her face serious. "Jean. I can feel Daddy, but I can't tell where he is." The little girl shook her head, looking up at her mother. "But I think Daddy is on a tree." Wanda blinked. "A tree?" "Uh-huh." Jean nodded. She then looked over at Bruce Banner. "Daddy is going to be just fine." Bruce Banner looked at the little girl, noted the lack of warmth in her gaze, and managed an awkward smile. "I'm sorry. There's a monster living inside you. But it feels very sad right now." Jean studied Bruce with innocent curiosity. Wanda, having processed the news of Gwen's disappearance, noticed Bruce. She turned to Sharon, confused. "Who is this?" "Dr. Bruce Banner," Sharon replied. "Bruce." Wanda looked at him, surprised, then turned back to Sharon. "Wait. I thought Hawk killed him. Did Hawk bring him back?" "No, he's not our Bruce Banner." Sharon shook her head. "He's the Bruce Banner from a parallel universe. We don't know how he ended up in ours." Wanda stared at him, intrigued. Bruce, feeling like a zoo animal under her scrutiny, cleared his throat. "We fought side by side once. In my universe, I mean." Wanda gave him a suspicious look. "Are you sure about that?" "Yes." Bruce then launched into a condensed version of his history, how they had raided the Sokovia fortress, how Wanda had used her chaos magic to scramble Tony Stark's mind, which led to the creation of Ultron, and the crisis that followed. Listening to the story, Sharon looked at Wanda. "Your chaos magic can do all that?" Wanda shook her head, looking just as lost. "I have no idea." And she didn't. Her life had gone from being a lab rat in a Hydra facility to being a devoted mother in Westview. Chaos magic. She knew she was powerful, but she had never done anything close to what Bruce was describing. Nearby, Pietro, who had been listening the whole time, couldn't hold back. He turned to Bruce. "Wait. Did you just say I died getting shot?" "Yeah." "Is this some kind of sick joke?" Pietro let out a disbelieving laugh. "I'm Quicksilver. You're telling me I couldn't dodge a bullet?" Bruce shrugged. "In my universe, you died." Pietro's lip curled. "Well, in this universe, you're the one who died." Seeing the tension rising between the two men trading death notifications, Sharon stepped in. "Guys, the who died where debate can wait. We have bigger problems. Where is Gwen, and does Hawk know she's missing? That is priority 1. And priority 2 is this Thanos guy you keep mentioning." Bruce Banner stared at Sharon, astounded that she was prioritizing Gwen's disappearance over the Mad Titan. "Thanos is the threat. He's coming." Sharon met his gaze. "I don't know if Thanos has the power to destroy the Earth or not. But I do know that if Gwen is missing and Hawk doesn't know about it, the Earth is going to be destroyed." "Ah." Seeing how serious Sharon was, Bruce looked over at Doctor Strange. "Is this Hawk guy worse than Thanos?" Strange thought back to the apocalyptic montage he had witnessed in Hawk's timeline. He looked at Bruce. "You have no idea. Then why are you friends with him?" Bruce couldn't make sense of it. He turned to Tony Stark. "Where's your anti-Hawk armor?" Tony frowned. "My what?" "In my universe, you thought I was too dangerous, so you built the Hulkbuster armor to stop me. You don't have a Hulk here, but you have a Hawk. You must have built a Hawkbuster, right?" "I never said Hawk was uncontrollable," Tony replied, though a calculating look crossed his face as he stared at Bruce. That's an interesting idea, though. A hawkbuster. Bruce was baffled. Seeing his confusion, Sharon chuckled and offered a brief explanation of Hawk's operating logic. You stay in your lane, I stay in mine. As long as no one provoked him, Hawk was happy to obey local laws and act like a model citizen. But the moment someone crossed a line or tried to test him, he would explode. A minor offense got an entire family line erased, a major offense got a species wiped out. Because of that rigid code, even though Hawk was brutal, he was considered manageable. No one in power entertained the idea of trying to take him out. In fact, the opposite was true. The 5 global superpowers quietly viewed Hawk as Earth's deterrent, the weapon securing their expansion into the cosmos. Like right now. You said Thanos is coming for the Infinity Stones. He's going to be disappointed. Hawk has 2 of them, and he's not on Earth. So what is Thanos going to do here? Hearing Sharon's logic, Dr. Strange looked down. The eye of Agamotto hummed, revealing the emerald glow of the Time Stone. He looked back up at her. Sharon stared at the green gem around Strange's neck and drew in a sharp breath. Just as she was about to speak, the house began to shake. Pietro reacted first. In a blur, he vanished out the front door and reappeared a second later, eyes wide. There's a massive alien ship hovering right over the town. The room froze. Then they rushed outside. Looking up, a ring-shaped alien transport ship hovered in the sky, casting a shadow over Westview. Hiss. Initiate Westview Emergency Protocol Alpha. Evacuate the Chloes and Anya Phoenix. Yes, ma'am. The SHIELD agents redeployed to Westview after Sharon's reinstatement sprang into action. Sharon turned to Wanda and Pietro, her face grim. Wanda, just to be safe, you need to leave too. Now. Before Wanda could nod, Pietro vanished. When he reappeared, he had Billy under one arm and Tommy under the other. As for Oleg and Irina Maximoff, they had gone across the street to visit Andrew and Amy Chloe shortly before Sharon and the others arrived. Minutes later. SHIELD. Agents hammered on the Chloe's door, ushering the bewildered families out of the house. Wanda. Jean. Anya, about to climb into an armored transport with her parents, spotted Wanda standing on the porch across the street. She broke away, running over to hug Jean, then looked at Wanda. What's going on? Where did that alien ship come from? Wanda shook her head. Sharon, busy coordinating the evacuation, had just finished reporting the incident to headquarters. She turned to Anya. Anya, can you reach Hawk? Anya looked at her, confused. Hasn't he come back yet? No. What about Gwen? Can she reach him? Sharon's mind raced. She decided not to mention Gwen's disappearance yet. These aliens are likely looking for your family to use as leverage against Hawk for his Infinity Stones. You need to get out of here. We'll hold them off. She gave a sharp nod to the armed SHIELD detail standing by. Wanda looked up at the spacecraft, her heart tightening. She nodded. Flanked by agents, she, Pietro, and Anya climbed into a waiting armored vehicle. The moment the convoy carrying the Maximoffs and the Chloe sped out of Westview. Boom. Boom. 2 columns of white light shot down from the hovering ship, slamming into the main street of Westview. As the light faded, 2 figures stood in the street. One was tall, gaunt, and moved with an unnerving elegance, Ebony Maw. The other was a hulking beast with skin like iron, Cull Obsidian. Dr. Strange reacted fast. His hands flashed through Madras, casting a mirror dimension spell that pulled the town of Westview into a parallel reality. This ensured that no matter how destructive the fight became, the actual town would remain unharmed. Tony Stark analyzed the 2 aliens, who had stayed still since arriving. He frowned. It doesn't look like they came for Wanda or the Chloes. At first, he had assumed this was a kidnapping attempt to extort the stones from Hawk. But Ebony Maw and Cull Obsidian had waited until Hawk's family was evacuated before making their entrance. A coincidence? Or a deliberate choice? Were they trying to avoid the wrong message, knowing that targeting Hawk's family would trigger a response beyond anything they could handle? After all, arriving while Hawk's family was present sent a different message than arriving after they had left. But if they weren't here for Hawk? Tony turned to Dr. Strange. They're here for you. I know. Strange had come to the same conclusion. They weren't after Hawk. They were after him. But what's the point of taking the Time Stone? If you don't have the guts to face Hawk and take his stones, getting mine still won't give you a full set. Strange's mind worked, trying to figure out their angle. Ebony Maw, moving with that same unnerving elegance, raised a long spindly finger. He pointed first at Dr. Strange, then shifted his finger to Bruce Banner. Hand over those 2, and we will leave this place in peace. Chapter 293, 397. Enter the Celestials. While Earth sorted out its internal conflicts, Hawk surveyed his new domain. Through the crucible of the four elements of creation and the evolutionary power of the Parasol World Tree, the void left by Asgard's destruction had been filled. A new divine realm had been born, the Parasol Divine Realm. The realm was shaped as a flat expanse under a domed sky, a square continent cradling rolling mountain ranges and rushing rivers. Among the mountains, waterfalls cascaded downward, weaving rainbows through the mist. But the waterfalls in the mountains were not the grandest, nor were their rainbows the most spectacular. The largest waterfall defined the very edge of the realm. The earth stopped, giving way to an abyssal drop. A torrent of water plunged tens of thousands of feet, crashing into the swirling nebula below. Standing anywhere in the Parasol Divine Realm and looking up, one could always see the outline of the Parasol World Tree, and perched upon its branches, a phoenix burning with golden fire. When the phoenix rose and its fires burned bright, it was day in the realm. When the phoenix returned to its nest, it was night. On the eastern plains, a grand staircase carved from diamonds climbed toward the sky. 99,999 steps. At the end of those steps, hovering miles above the ground, a palace complex sat nestled among the clouds. But the palace looked unfinished. Which, to be fair, it was. Gwen had only drafted a portion of the blueprints. Roughly a third of the grand design remained unsketched. Whatever. I'll leave it for Gwen to finish when she gets back. Standing on the diamond plaza in front of the main palace, Hawk muttered to himself. He took one last look at the unfinished structures, then turned away. It was time to leave. As he prepared to depart, Hawk's gaze deepened, piercing through the Parasol World Tree itself to stare into the vast expanse of the primary universe waiting outside. By claiming the World Tree, he had put a target on his own back. Time knew who he was now. Hawk hadn't just angered time. He had offended the primary universe itself. The reasoning was straightforward. If the primary universe had consumed the World Tree, it could have birthed a new multiverse. When that pie was cut, time wouldn't have been the only cosmic force to get a slice. Instead, Hawk had stolen the bakery, leaving the primary universe with crumbs. So, he hadn't just snatched food from time. He had robbed the primary universe blind. Hawk had zero doubts that the moment he stepped outside, the primary universe would throw everything it had at him. He already had proof. The fact that his cosmic senses couldn't pinpoint which parallel universe Gwen had been banished to was proof enough. Time alone wasn't powerful enough to blind his perception across the multiverse. The other laws must have pitched in. Space, 4-1. The primary universe's spatial law was an accomplice. Only by combining time and space into a unified continuum could they isolate Gwen's location from Hawk's senses. He had pissed off the primary universe, and they were going to try and crush him the second he stepped outside. Bring it on. Just don't go crying when things get rough. He had made his vow, exactly how they sent his Gwen away, they were going to bring her back. As Hawk considered the greeting he was about to receive upon leaving the World Tree, a cold smirk touched his lips. You started this war. But I decide when it ends. Hawk took a step. He crossed the boundary of the Parasol World Tree and set foot in the void of the primary universe. His river of time began to churn in the future. Waves crashed along the timeline, generating vision after vision of his own death. But this was an automatic defense mechanism by time. It wasn't a fixed future, it was a projection, an intimidation tactic. Time was unleashing a barrage of prophecies, trying to shake Hawk's resolve. The goal was simple, get him to flinch. The moment his will wavered, time would lock one of those futures into certainty. But Hawk glanced at the temporal assault snapping at his heels. He looked away. Compared to time's attacks, he was more focused on his own condition. Because the moment time discovered him, a crushing malice from the primary universe slammed into his body. The universe was attempting to suppress his power. Only. Boom. Hawk ignited his cosmo. A shockwave of golden energy erupted from his body, radiating outward. The cosmic suppression, which had momentarily dropped his power to mortal levels, was burned away as his cosmo exploded to life. His strength began to climb. In the blink of an eye, Hawk's power surged back to the celestial tier. Heh. Is that all? Standing in the vacuum of space, Hawk scoffed. I barely even flexed. He was only burning his cosmo right now. He hadn't come close to detonating it. Yes, the natural state of the primary universe suppressed his baseline power to mortal levels. However, all he needed was to ignite his cosmo, returning him to his peak. As a gold saint, he possessed cosmo energy reserves that were virtually limitless. The primary universe attempted to suppress him, but it was futile. Hawk could sustain his cosmo continuously, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And most importantly, when you've hit a training plateau, the best way to break through is to add resistance. Don't stop now. Push harder. If you quit now, I'm going to be disappointed. Hawk's smirk deepened. Looking out at the vastness of the primary universe, he mocked the cosmos itself as if having a conversation. He let out a final laugh, turned, and prepared to leave. Just then, a tuning fork, larger than Earth itself, materialized from the void and swung at Hawk. Boom! The cry of the phoenix resonated. As Hawk turned, a spectral projection flared behind him, a golden phoenix perched upon a parasol tree, its wings cradling a golden universe. In a flash, the spectral phoenix shattered into the components of his gold cloth, locking onto his body piece by piece until the visor slammed into place. Boom! Hawk raised his right hand, caught the incoming tuning fork, and with a vicious yank redirected its momentum, sending the wielder crashing toward a nearby planet. A humanoid figure, encased in thick armor, sporting 6 circular sensors on its faceplate and standing an estimated 200 miles tall, stumbled from the void and hurtled toward the planet below. Just before the giant slammed into the surface, it stabilized. A celestial. Which one are you? Hawk raised an eyebrow, looking at the armored giant. He wasn't surprised by the celestials showing up. He had stolen the world tree. Time was furious. And since eternity, the embodiment of time, had created the celestials, of course they felt their boss's anger. Stepping into time's line of sight was the same as stepping into the celestials' crosshairs. He had expected them to come looking for trouble. He just hadn't expected them to show up this fast. Whatever. Even if the celestials hadn't come for him, he was planning on hunting them down anyway. He didn't have a choice. Time lacked a physical form. Eternity was MIA. If he wanted to bring Gwen home fast, he had to go through the celestials. They were the caretakers of the primary multiverse's timeline. Gargaratus. The vibrator. Having regained its balance, the 6-eyed celestial boomed, its voice vibrating through the vacuum of space. Gargaratus. The vibrator. Hawk repeated the name, ran it through his mental database, and shrugged. Never heard of you. If he had to guess, this was one of the second-generation celestials bred by the originals using a life-bearing planet as an incubator. Calling them second generation made sense. Eternity had created 3 celestials. Erishem the judge. Exitar the exterminator. Essen the searcher. Eternity was the father, those 3 were the sons, and the rest of the celestials running around the cosmos were the grandchildren. Every celestial's title was linked to its cosmic function. The original 3 were obvious. But Hawk also recognized several grandchildren. Gammonon the gatherer. Harjen the measurer. And this guy introducing himself as the vibrator. Hawk could guess his job. He monitored temporal vibrations. When a tremor occurred in the timeline, he traveled to the epicenter to investigate. The most logical deduction. However, none of that mattered right now. Hawk committed the name Gargaratus to memory, chuckled, and ignored the celestial's 200-mile height. He cut to the chase. Your timing is perfect. Saves me the trouble of hunting you down. I'll give you one chance. Bring my wife back from whatever multiverse time banished her to, and we can pretend this never happened. Boom. Hawk didn't get to finish. Gargaratus, its form vibrating with the density of adamantium, boomed back. You disrupted the timeline. You must die. Hawk heard the response and laughed. Too bad. Gargaratus didn't give him a chance to say anything else. After declaring the sentence, the celestial swung its tuning fork, the 6 sensors on its faceplate flashing as it charged. Seeing the incoming assault, Hawk smirked. He slid his right foot back, settled into a stance, and shook his head. Since we can't talk this out like civilized people, I guess I'll just beat the answers out of you. Burn, my Cosmo. Phoenix's winged ascent.